Commission. I'm Katie Sieben, the chair of the commission. I'll take the role of the other commissioners who are present for today. Commissioner Partridge.
Here.
Commissioner Hahn.
Here.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Here.
And Commissioner Tuma.
Here.
A quorum is present. We have just 2 items on our agenda today. Mr. Fournier, nice to see you in person. Please introduce item number 1.
Morning, Chair Sieben and Commissioners. Item number 1 is docket number 24-08 involving Q-Link Wireless. In the matter of a petition of the Minnesota Department of Commerce for revocation of the eligible telecommunications carrier status of Q-Link Wireless pursuant to Minnesota Rule 7812.1400 subpart 15. The question before the Commission is, should the Commission grant the request of the Minnesota Department of Commerce to revoke Q-Link Wireless LLC's Lifeline ETC designation? The parties, which consist of the Office of the Attorney General, Residential Utilities Division, and the Department of Commerce, are available for questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Tuma, did you want to hear from the parties?
I do. If they could.
The parties could please come forward. Good morning. Could you please state your appearance for the record?
Good morning, Chair Sieben. Richard Dornfeld, Assistant Attorney General, appearing today on behalf of the Minnesota Department of Commerce.
Good morning, Commissioners. Lisa Gonzalez on behalf of the Department of Commerce.
Catherine Hinderly on behalf of the Office of the Attorney General, Residential Utilities Division.
So, Ms. Gonzalez, Mr. Dornfield, do we have any knowledge of contact information of the actual Minnesota customers for Q-Link? A database someplace? Do we have anything that we could contact them? Because I'm not seeing that we're going to ask Q-Link to do anything here. They're sitting in, hopefully by now, sitting in a prison someplace down in near Miami or someplace less desirable. So,
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, we're not aware of any of those records in the state's possession. We did attempt to contact Q-Link and obtain them, and those efforts were not successful. The staff briefing papers mentioned this, but there was a FCC proceeding to transfer all of Q-Link's customers to a subsidiary of T-Mobile and ensure that those customers continue to receive seamless Lifeline service. So hopefully that should make sure that any Minnesota customers who would have otherwise been affected are continuing to receive reliable telephone service.
And that ship has sailed. I mean, I went online. You don't want to base anything off of chat rooms, but it wasn't as seamless as I think we would have hoped it would have been. But most of the people did indicate that T-Mobile did step up after confusion and what was happening. People just wanted to keep their numbers. I mean, what it came down to, you build yourself around your ideas, your phone number, and so that was a lot of the chat that was going on in the chat rooms about struggling trying to get T-Mobile to get them to keep their numbers. But that ship has sailed. The one I'm thinking about more so is this was not a like we did with LTD, Living the Dream folks, where they were charged with a violation of FCC rules and they're still trying to be a company. These guys are actually pled guilty in federal district court. And my understanding is they forfeited a lot of assets, which I'm sure all tied up in bankruptcies and activities with the federal court, whether we could provide any information to the Minnesota customers of how to seek that restitution. And so I don't know if the FCC has done anything, or are you aware of anything as far as that, giving us information to give to Minnesota customers, or if they're giving anything to Minnesota customers? What I was reading, they weren't getting anything, but again, I don't want to put a lot of value into what you read in chat rooms, but are you aware of anything?
We're not aware of any of efforts of that nature. Our understanding is that no restitution is likely owed to Minnesota customers, given that this is Lifeline service, and so essentially the harm was to the federal government, who was paying for service that wasn't, being used, and so there's nothing, frankly, owed back to the Minnesota customers.
That I don't know, but at least in the federal court, they did indicate people could file a claim. I don't know what that looked like, and if I'm a Lifeline Link customer, I don't even know how I would start doing that, so I don't know if there was a way that we could make life easier for providing that information, but I'm seeing that we don't have a lot of ability to connect with them. Would you be at all adverse to at least finding out from the federal prosecutors or from the FCC if we could do anything along that lines? I don't know what's out there, and I don't want to make you chase around it after something. I don't think we should make T-Mobile do it, because then we discourage companies from taking over service like this if they know they're going to have to do a whole bunch of compliance filing. So is that something we're willing to at least contact the FCC and the federal courts?
Certainly, the department would be happy to reach out to the FCC and see what might be available, and to the Department of Justice to see what might be appropriate. The other options might be for the commission and the department to place information on their websites for affected customers, given we don't have good contact information for the customers themselves.
That might be the end result. My understanding from our folks here, there has been no complaints that they've seen come through, so that's I guess somewhat of a heartwarming sign that at least people aren't just screaming and hollering out there. That maybe T-Mobile, after the initial blow up on the chat rooms, figured out how to take care of these customers. Mr. Blodgett, if you could put up a quick decision option that I threw together yesterday afternoon, and pass that over to the folks over there, that would be appreciated. Let you finish reading it, and I'll tell you my thinking.
Mike, sorry.
I was just
Commissioner
waiting
Toomey,
for
you're
eyes-
waiting for
eyes to come
people
up.
to read, and then I have a question for you
Sure.
too.
I meant to be very squishy, Madam Chair, and 60 days, see what you can find out. If there's something we can do, we can do it. If there's something we can't do, tell us why you can't do it. If you find out there's maybe 10 customers in Minnesota and it's not worth the time to chase around to put up a website, I don't want to put up a website. I just want you guys to explore it, just in case there is something we're missing here. The whole porting and all that stuff, is the ship has sailed, but the restitution, I don't know. I don't know what's out there. Maybe the guy had a lot of money hidden in Bitcoins, and they're sitting trying to break the Bitcoin, and they have billions of dollars all of a sudden. I don't know. We don't know.
Mr. Dornfeld, do
Chair.
you want to speculate on the Bitcoin?
Chair Sieben, I do not, but the department is fine with this decision option. We're happy to explore what might be available to help Minnesota customers and report back in 60 days.
Mr. Dornfeld, do you know, or for the department, the Q-Link customers who are on Lifeline, can we obligate Lifeline to notify the customers of the other resources that are available for Lifeline services? Because when I was reading the docket, it feels like, I think that Ms. Gonzalez, it was you, or the department said, like, customers can go to the Department of Commerce's website to find alternative Lifeline services. That seems like a high bar for people to find the website to be notified of other services available. So could we require Q-Link to do a notification?
Chair Sieben, we certainly don't have any objections to ordering Q-Link to notify customers
They could probably,
They
would
don't-
they? Yeah.
They don't seem to, frankly, really exist anymore as a sort of a going concern. So it might be sort of a good belt and suspenders approach, but it may not have a lot of practical effect.
They won't do it. In other words, they won't listen, or there's no one really to send out the notice anyway, essentially.
That's
Probably.
sort of our understanding of where they stand today.
Did you have any thoughts about that, Commissioner Tuma?
No, that
It's
was my
kinda like-
struggle. I mean, when I read the criminal record and everything, this was not something where anybody's going to exist. I mean, this guy's going to be sitting in a prison someplace. I suppose we can order him to start licking stamps and sending out notices to people, but I don't know if he's going to pay attention to us. So that's why I was trying to find an alternative way to try to find these people and let them know these things are out there. Most of them have already figured out service. There was T-Mobile did take over it. There was another company that was involved. So more than likely, all these people have received service. We haven't seen any complaints, so I'm not too nervous about the lifeline. I think they've probably landed where they're going to land, and we don't really need to help them anymore. But if there was restitution out there, and I don't know what it is, it'd be nice if there was discussion about activities at the federal court, and I could not figure it out. And that's why I was asking the department if they could just make a couple phone calls and see if there's something there. So,
Sounds good.
Madam Chair, I would move decision option 1 in the briefing papers and Tuma's decision option that's up on the screen. And is 60 days okay? I just threw 60 days in there because it sounded good.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, 60 days should be fine. Thank you.
On Commissioner Tuma's motion, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion prevails.
Pick once for it.
Thank you very much.
Make us a
Thank
lot
you
of
for your
game there.
work, too.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Mr. Sulpus, please introduce item number 3.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item number 3 is docket number 24404 in the matter of Otter Tail Power's petition for approval of the Solway and Abercrombie solar projects and the petition of Otter Tail Power Company for the exemption of the certificate of need for the 50 megawatt Solway solar project. The issues before the Commission are whether the Commission should approve Otter Tail's investments in the Solway and Abercrombie solar projects. Should the Commission determine that the projects qualify for application toward the Eligible Energy Technology Standard and the Carbon-Free Standard? Should the Commission authorize future cost recovery through the Renewable Resources Cost Recovery Rider, subject to Commission review and approval of costs on a future petition? Should the Commission limit cost recovery to a capital cost cap, and if so, how should the Commission set the cap? And should the Commission authorize Otter Tail Power to charge its Minnesota ratepayers for North Dakota's share of the solar projects, with the understanding that South Dakota recently filed or issued an order that they would also participate in the projects. Couple of notes: since the briefing papers were filed, Otter Tail filed a letter with proposed decision options, and staff filed Sullivan compiled decision options as well. I have hard copies of both documents with me. Parties consist of the company, Department of Commerce, Office of the Attorney General, IUOE Local 49, and NC, SRC of Carpenters, and LIUNA, and they've all been informed that they'll have 3 minutes for opening remarks. And that's all I have, and I am available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. If the parties could please come forward, we'll start with opening statements or comments. Mr. Kajewski, you can slide up, or those middle microphones for work too. Mr. Stephenson, if you wanted to begin with opening comments and introducing yourself, that'd be great.
Thank you, Chair Sieben. Good morning, Chair Sieben and Commissioners. Kerry Stephenson on behalf of Otter Tail Power. And we appreciate the opportunity to discuss the Solway and Abercrombie Solway projects with you today. Two projects we're very excited about, and these projects align with and support our Minnesota Integrated Resource Plan. They support our compliance with the carbon-free standard, and they will provide years of low-cost renewable generation for our Minnesota and South Dakota customers. And I'll address our preferred decision options with some very brief commentary. Under the section Approval, we support decision options 1, 2, and 3. Under the section Cost Recovery, we support OTP Modified Decision Option 4.1, which we believe better reflects what we're asking of the Commission. For reasons we're happy to discuss, we're not asking the Commission to charge Minnesota ratepayers for the North Dakota share of these projects the way we have structured, and the way we will account for these projects in MISO means that there will not be a North Dakota share. North Dakota customers will not receive any of the energy, capacity, or REC benefits from these projects. In terms of the proposed cost caps before you, we support two options. The first is the DOC symmetrical aggregate cost cap with modifications consistent with the cap, the intent of the cap as reflected in OTP decision option 6.1. And we also support what is often referenced as a traditional soft cap, which is reflected in OTP decision option 7.1. And we understand the other cap proposals, but we are concerned about non-symmetrical caps with very little leeway for relief for events clearly outside our control. And first, these type of caps appear more stringent than the cap approved for Xcel's Sherco Solar 3 project cited by the department. And we're a much smaller utility, of course, and given the size of the projects relative to our size and the fact that I think we're in a much more volatile environment right now, this seems somewhat incongruent to us. Also, we believe that any cap should consider the fact that the next most competitive projects we evaluated had levelized cost of energy 50% higher than the proposed projects. And in this context, we think some flexibility and balance is not unreasonable. Even if we sought some relief, and that would be a very high standard to meet, our customers are still going to see a fantastic value from these projects relative to the options available. And at a minimum, we think that the decision option 6 reference to cost of solar panel supplies should be amended to be the more inclusive solar project supplies. And finally, we think the Commission can take notice of large and some very complex projects on time and in or under budget. And thank you, and we look forward to the discussion today.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kajewski, would you like to go next?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Richard Kajewski, the Director of Government Affairs for the North Central States Regional Council of Carpenters. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of Otter Tail Power Company's application for the 50 megawatt. Would you like me to start over? All right. These projects represent a critical step forward for Minnesota and the region countryside in North Dakota. Are we good? Not just in clean energy, but in supporting skilled. Are we good? In supporting skilled trades workers and local economic growth in Minnesota. Based on size, the Solway Solar facility could generate approximately 70 construction jobs during its peak, while Abercrombie Solar could be expected to create nearly 300 construction jobs at peak. These are high-quality, family-sustaining jobs that provide career advancement opportunities for our members and support the economic sustainability of those surrounding communities. Some of the work in North Dakota will need to be done by tradesmen and women from Minnesota. Our 27,000 members scattered throughout 6 states in the Midwest are among the best trained in the industry, with specialized skills to safely and efficiently deliver complex renewable energy projects on time and within budget. We have a proven track record of partnering with developers and contractors to ensure projects just like these are completed to the highest standard of safety and quality, while also empowering a diverse and inclusive workforce. Our tradesmen and women are willing to assist in delivering reliable energy that aligns with Otter Tail Power's overall goal of transitioning to a cleaner energy mix and meeting Minnesota's carbon-free electricity goals. Beyond job creation, these projects will generate significant tax revenue, estimated at $4.2 million from Solway and $23.8 million from Abercrombie over their lifespans, benefiting local schools, infrastructure, and services. They'll also help keep electricity affordable and reliable by leveraging existing transmission infrastructure and integrating with Otter Tail's low-cost energy resources. Approving these projects means investing in Minnesota's clean energy future, supporting working families, ensuring this region remains competitive and resilient, and gives new apprentices an opportunity to pursue a great career in the building and construction trades. On behalf of the North Central States Regional Council of Carpenters, I urge you to approve Otter Tail Power's application for the Solway and Abercrombie solar projects. Thank you.
My name is Nathan Runke. I'm with the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 49. We have over 15,000 members across Minnesota and the Dakotas. They're heavy equipment operators, mechanics, and stationary engineers, and over 13,000 of those members actually live in Minnesota. So I'm going to kind of tag along with a lot of the statements he just made and not make you listen to them again, but some kind of just from our craft, I looked at our out of work list, which is how we would put people out to work if this were a union, or if these projects are done by union labor. And the Abercrombie job we would be putting out of our Fargo office. Currently on our out of work list, 57% of the members are from Minnesota. So in that part, the people that would be next up for work in that office, 57% of them would be Minnesotans going out to a job like that if they were qualified for what they were looking for. In contrast, the Solway would be out of our Bagley office, and that one was 85% of those were Minnesotan, and only 4% would be people from North Dakota. So from our craft, a large part of the workforce likely to do this kind of work, whether it were just across the border in North Dakota or in Minnesota, there would be a lot of Minnesotans completing that work. We're confident that both projects would provide those good family-sustaining job opportunities, apprenticeship opportunities like Richard just mentioned, and I'll keep it to that. So thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Runke. And Mr. Pranis.
Thank you, Chair Sieben. Kevin Pranis on behalf of Lyona, Minnesota, North Dakota. We are supportive of approval of the projects as proposed by Otter Tail. They're consistent with the Utilities Integrated Resource Plan. They're necessary to meet the obligations under the renewable energy and carbon-free standards, and we think they're beneficial to Otter Tail ratepayers and Minnesotans who will benefit from the project. Between these two projects, as my colleagues have mentioned, there's an opportunity to create hundreds of union jobs and construction career opportunities for Minnesota workers. It's our understanding that Otter Tail Power's intention is to build the project with local union labor. What that would accomplish is first ensuring creation of high-quality jobs and career opportunities through registered apprenticeship programs that successfully serve local workers. It also ensures availability of skilled labor to build infrastructure that will be a regulated asset and that needs to be built well, right, and to last. And finally, it ensures the socioeconomic benefits of the project largely flow to Minnesota ratepayers. And there, I think it's important. We actually ran some numbers to see where would the workforce come from, looking at our membership, which also crosses over to North Dakota. And 85% of all of our members who live within 100 miles of the project are on the Minnesota side. So to be clear, those socioeconomic benefits related to jobs overwhelmingly flow to Minnesotans. that gets to the issue of jurisdictional allocation. We think that it is reasonable for Minnesota to take the entirety or lion's share of these projects, given that they advance our policy objectives and requirements, that we would get all of the associated benefits of the energy generation, capacity and energy sales, and that the socioeconomic benefits are largely going to flow to the Minnesota side. We would consider the location of the Abercrombie project to basically be Minnesota for purposes of workforce. And then finally, on the support for soft caps, as a policy matter, we generally think it's more reasonable and realistic, given volatile market conditions, lots of economic cross currents, incredibly difficult to actually allocate a particular change in price or a particular component to a particular policy, right? That's not to say that we can't generally understand that tariffs, for example, impose certain costs, right? But I think that that's something that needs to be developed in a record. I don't think that's something that you can have an automatic assignment. And also, finally, that labor, our fear about hard caps is labor is often the first one sacrificed when there is a fixed budget for a project and a bunch of extra unanticipated costs come up. We've had those conversations with developers who said, well, we did intend to use your folks, but then the cost of this went up and that went up, and we just ran out of money for sort of construction side. So we strongly support a cost cap where the company has the burden to prove up any additional costs. And as Otter Tail Power pointed out, it seems incredibly likely that any additional costs would be well under the cost of competing projects, so that ratepayers would be better off regardless. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Schultz.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Stay back from the mic a little bit. Peter Schultz on behalf of the Office of the Attorney General Residential Utilities Division. Pleased to be here today to discuss the approval of 2 solar projects that appear to be very good, cost-effective projects. While we don't know what other projects a formal RFP style procurement process might have identified, the Abercrombie and Solway projects are far and away the cheapest options that Otter Tail was able to find through its outreach to developers. These projects are well positioned to bring benefits to both Otter Tail's ratepayers and to the workforce and economies of Minnesota and the Dakotas. I'll use the balance of my time to walk through the decision options and explain why we do or don't support certain options. With respect to decision option 1, we would support that with one minor, what we think is a minor clarification, which is that rather than approving Otter Tail's investment in these projects, period, we would recommend adding that the Commission is approving the investments as eligible for renewable rider recovery. The approval contemplated under Section 216B, 1645 is simply a threshold finding that's necessary for rider recovery. Leaving the decision option as written makes it sound kind of like an advanced determination of prudence, which is not something that we recognize in Minnesota. We support decision options 2 and 3 as written. With respect to option 4, we don't think the Commission needs to authorize future cost recovery when there is no cost recovery petition in front of you. And we certainly don't support approving future cost recovery under the assumption that Minnesota ratepayers will automatically cover North Dakota's share. Decision options 1 and 2 already provide that Otter Tail needs, provide what Otter Tail needs to bring a rider petition to recover these projects, so we don't see a need for 4. With respect to 5 and 6, we don't support 5 for 2 reasons. First, we think that the cost cap should be separated for the 2 projects rather than aggregated. Otter Tail bid the project separately, not as a unit, and the purpose of cost caps is to incentivize efficiency in completing the projects, and so if you aggregate them, then potential overruns in one project can then offset savings on the other side. We also don't support a symmetrical cap under 5 because it would let Otter Tail keep all savings if the projects come in under budget. So if you combine 5 and 6, then ratepayers would get the worst parts of a symmetrical and an asymmetrical cap. The company would get to rate base any savings below the cap, essentially, and would still have the opportunity to come back and ask to exceed the cap, which would put a lot of risks on ratepayers. So instead of 5 and 6, we support 7 to cap the cost separately at Otter Tail's current estimates and share 90% of any savings below the cap with ratepayers. If the Commission disagrees with us on the hard cap and wants to give Otter Tail the opportunity to come back and ask to recover costs that exceed its estimates, then it's even more important that the company share any savings below the cap with ratepayers, as suggested in the second sentence of decision option 7. So that last sentence of 7, and we appreciate Commissioner Sullivan including that in his draft motion. With respect to 8, we support that. We think it's premature for the Commission to decide that Minnesota will cover the entirety of everything except for South Dakota, what South Dakota is covering. Instead, the commission should adopt 8, reject the proposal, or alternatively, you could deny it without prejudice and direct Otter Tail to formally request approval of at least the Abercrombie project from North Dakota. And then finally, we support Commissioner Sullivan's new option 9. We think that will provide helpful information. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz and Dr. Leap.
Thank you. Sydney Lieb with the Minnesota Department of Commerce. The department supports approval of these 2 solar projects. The projects are consistent with the resource acquisition ordered in the most recent Otter Tail Power Integrated Resource Plan. And as everyone else has mentioned already, the price of these projects is extremely competitive and well below the costs of other comparable projects. We acknowledge that the total installed megawatt hours are slightly higher than the approved resource acquisition in the IRP. However, given the competitive prices of these projects, we're still recommending approval. Given uncertainty in the price of future renewables due to potential actions by the federal government, we anticipate that this pricing is much lower than the company may be able to obtain in future resource acquisition. These resources are important to move the utility towards compliance with the state's zero emitting electricity by 2040 requirement. The department supports splitting the project costs between South Dakota and Minnesota. These states will receive the energy and benefits of these projects. Delaying these projects for an inevitable affirmative decision by North Dakota risks missing out on the cost-competitive projects and/or a further delay in the project and service date, which is important because it exposes them to potential changes in federal tax credit sunsets. It's important to get these projects going as quickly as possible, given the competitive of the pricing and the uncertainty in federal action. The department supports an aggregate symmetrical cost cap with an option for the PUC to consider relief for federal actions. The cost cap is consistent with prior approvals and balances ratepayer protections with uncertainty in federal action, and the aggregation of the 2 projects allows efficiency and ease, as there may be some costs that are applicable to both projects that may be challenging for the utility to disentangle and assign to each project individually. In summary, we support decision options 1 through 6, 4 as originally written, or Otter Tail Power's revised 4, which is a good clarification. We are agnostic on Otter Tail's 6. We do not support Otter Tail's 7. This is implying a soft cost cap and does not incent the utility to maintain the bid price. And this is inconsistent with how we've treated other bids in the past for other utilities. And we do not support Otter Tail's 8. On Commissioner Sullivan's, we agree with the OAG that the new 9, A and B, will provide valuable information about how the projects are operating in the power markets. And on Commissioner Sullivan's suggestion of the asymmetric cost cap, we acknowledge that it's important to understand how these bids are coming under and consider giving the money back to ratepayers. But we also acknowledge that there's a challenge that that's something that can be done with a utility project, but not something that can be done with a PPA. So it creates a fairness, and it also creates, I think, an incentive for the utility to increase their bid price, which might increase the bid prices across the board. So we're concerned about what that might do moving forward. One alternative may be to ask the utility to track those overages and then have the commission make a decision about whether or not or how much of that to give back to ratepayers. But we note that when the utility has a savings, they might use it to spread across the project and reduce mitigation and risks, of which there are many given federal uncertainty and strange federal actions around renewables right now. And a PPA project would have that type of flexibility, whereas a utility bid project will not. So I think we need to be careful and thoughtful about how we're thinking of looking at those costs. And that's it. The department's available for questions.
Thank you very much to all of our commenters. Commissioner Sullivan.
I just have a couple of questions, but I appreciate the departments. I put the decision options out there. My feet aren't in concrete on them, but this is the conversation I wanted to have about. So I appreciate you mentioning that, because that's not something that I'd thought about. But I'll just state that what I was thinking about with the cost cap is I appreciated the department's, the way you were like, we'll do an aggregate that gives flexibility on, for the company. That's what we did with Sherco, and I appreciate that. And I mean, I don't project manage large projects like that, but I think that would be something that would give some flexibility to the company. But I also liked the idea that the OAG articulated, I thought quite well, that, there should be some benefit if the company comes in under for ratepayers, and that's why I like the 90-10 split. So I was really trying to put them both together there, and as a way to, both potentially reward the company for doing well with that 10%, but then also be, not having really a hard cap in place and giving the flexibility to the company on the top end. So if you can kind of follow where I'm going. So, but we can talk more about that, but there are two questions that I wanted to get first, and then I'm going to go back. And this is actually for the company, so I don't know who wants to answer, but the first question I had was that, and it's more, I'm curious, I'm sure you have a fix for it or you know how it's going to work, but it's Solway is a 66 megawatt unit or 66 megawatt solar facility, array, but the interconnection allows 50 megawatts. So my first thought is, well, okay, what are we going to do with that extra 16 megawatts? Why are we building that if the interconnection doesn't, there's 16 extra megawatts. Is there something behind the meter that's going to be feeding off of that, or what's the deal?
Mr. Jensen, please state your name for the record.
Nate Jensen with Otter Power. Commissioner Sullivan, the 66 megawatts is referencing the DC size of the project. It's pretty standard for solar projects to have a certain amount of DC overbuild to help maximize the amount of energy you can get out of the interconnection.
Oh, so basically, with it's 66 megawatts DC, but that translates to 50 megawatt. In the conversion to AC, you lose some of that capacity.
You don't necessarily lose some of the capacity, it's just the output is capped. And when you break down the economics of a project, it makes sense to overbuild on the DC. So you maximize the number of hours that you get the full output of the interconnection capability.
I'm going to ask a dumb question. So if you have a typical, say, what we would rate as a 100 megawatt solar facility, is that actually then, the interconnection is 80 megawatts, or is it 120 and then it's actually the interconnection is 100?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Sullivan, typically when you hear about a 100 megawatt solar facility, that's referencing the size of the interconnection, what can be injected into the grid. And every project's different, depends on the layout of the land, depends on the type of fracking you use, but anywhere from 20 to 30% overbuild is standard.
Okay, so it is right-sized, basically. It's not, we're not overbuilding it.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other question I had is, I know North Dakota is not going to pay for this, has not expressed interest in paying for it. And I appreciate that South Dakota has. But my question is like, why was the site selection in North Dakota in the first place? I mean, Minnesotans and South Dakotans are going to pay for a power plant that is not in one of those states. And it seems to me like they get the benefit of, something that we're paying for, and they specifically say, we don't want to pay for it. Yet you're going to build it there. And I mean, I'm just curious. It feels like we're rewarding a type of behavior that I wouldn't necessarily want to do if it were, one of my kids.
Mr. Stephenson.
Chair Sieben, thank you for that question, Commissioner Sullivan. The Abercrombie project has been under development, and we're not the developer, of course. It's Flickertail LLC, and they've been working at this, I believe, since 2018. And it's something that we began conversations with them, I believe, around when we filed our initial IRP, where we contemplated an additional 150 megawatts of solar. So we essentially had a very good solar project in our backyard being developed. I think it's approximately about 35 miles away from our general offices. And as those discussions progressed, it just became apparent that this was a very good project, and I can't speak for the developer why they chose that specific site. What came out in the site permit hearing in North Dakota is that this area, it's not prime ag land for the most part. There's a lot of alkaline soils in this area, so I'm sure the cost factor weighed into that substantially, because on the other side of the river, it is prime ag land. So this would be more in the sense of pasture, or not sure what the terms would be, scrubland perhaps. And then the interconnection weighs into that. There's a Minn-Kota interconnection, which this project, I think we have to build something on over about 500 meter collector pipeline. So it just made sense. So we have basically a project that has been in development for a number of years, made a lot of progress with land rights and those landowners, and then we began conversations with this developer. So that's the background of this project. It's been underway for quite a while. There's still some permitting going on in North Dakota, but much of it has been completed.
No, I appreciate that, and I also want to be clear that I mean, I understand a lot of these projects have been in motion for a long time, and Minnesotans will, Minnesota workforce is going to receive a significant benefit. Mr. Pranis indicated 85 or 90%. So I mean, I get all that, but there will be resources that go from Minnesota and South Dakota ratepayers that go to pay property taxes and those other community benefits. So, I mean, I get it. I'm not going to, there's no real point in crying about it or anything, but I appreciate the answer. And then, so I'm going to go back to the first thing that I kind of talked about with Dr. Lieb, and I'd be curious in what the company thinks of the cost cap proposal that I've put forward in the decision options. And
Mr. Stephenson.
Chair Sieben, yes, thank you for the question, Commissioner. The cost cap proposal would be Sullivan Modified 5. Mm-hmm. And I think conceptually,
well, that and also the requirement from the OAG that on the if you come under, 90% of those savings are returned to ratepayers, but 10% go to the company. So there is it's a blending of the hard cap concept and the symmetrical cap that the department is at. The idea is that you get a benefit if you come under the cap, but ratepayers do as well.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Sullivan, yes, I think conceptually we're not opposed to that kind of sharing if we do well and come under the cap. I think our bias as a utility has always been more on the risk mitigation side, particularly in the environment we're in right now. So the proposal, again, we're not opposed to that cost sharing mechanism, but I think we'd like to see, if the commission were open to it, a little bit more protection on the backside for events clearly outside our control.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the things that I've been thinking about is that if there's more protection, you said on the backside, I'm kind of thinking on the upside. If you go over project, there's some protections there for the company there because of the uncertainty that we're in. But on the downside, if you do come on, there's still a benefit to the company to come under, and there's also a significant benefit to ratepayers to come under. So I want there to be kind of directional vectors in each way. So, you're not, that the company is clearly incented to get the best cost.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Sullivan, again, yes, I don't think we're opposed to, if we come under, that I know the symmetrical as its purest form would be, we get it all.
Right.
And I don't think we're opposed to some cost sharing mechanism, but we'd like to see then some commensurate, I'll use the term again, backside protection to account for things that we just can't control. And of course, if we come back to you, we know it's a very high burden that we're going to have to show. But we would like to have that opportunity for things perhaps beyond just government action. We've tried to provide some examples, but clearly things that.
Yeah, I saw your thing. It looked like it was like out of Deuteronomy. It was like, acts of God,
Leviticus.
pestilence, plague. But I saw it.
But the concept is clear enough that if we source panels from this factory that is now 10 feet underwater because of a tsunami,
Yeah.
and we have to go somewhere else, we just would like to have the opportunity to make our case to you that it's reasonable, particularly in light of the fact that the next most competitive projects were so substantially higher in their levelized cost of energy. Our customers are going to get a fantastic value, even if we had to come to you and say, hey, this happened and we need a little relief here on this campus.
Yeah, no, I think that, I do agree, like, customers are going to get a good value out of it, and I appreciated that analysis on the record. I would be interested in, I mean, Mr. Pranis and Dr. Lee, but Mr. Pranis, you had said that, you know, I understand the point that you made about the hard cap. I'd be curious in your thoughts on this.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan, Chair Sieben, Commissioners. Yeah, I think conceptually we're very much in the same place. I think the incentive we want to create to we want to have an incentive for utilities, obviously, to try to control costs, but not at the expense of our key values, the quality of the asset safety, et cetera. And I think it seems appropriate to me that there is cost share, that ratepayers get advantage. When you can bring in a project under cost, you want the utility to have some incentive to do that, but you also want ratepayers, hopefully, to capture significant benefit from that. And agree with Otter Tail that I think the risks that could sort of out of control of the utility push costs up. There's a long list of possible things. Hopefully, none of them happen. Besides government policy, I think it is a very good deal for ratepayers to come in and say, look, we're going to, especially given the cost comparison with the other projects, that we will give some flexibility for the utility to come in and prove its case on the over, that the ratepayers should get some benefit on the under, and then I think we get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry to take this over, but if other people are chomping at the bit, but I just wanted to hear Dr. Lieb. And then after that, I'm just going to sit back and kind of marinate in this conversation, think about it, and hear what my colleagues have to say.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Sullivan, I think the department, if the company's okay with the 90-10 cost share on the savings, I think the department is obviously going to support that. That's fine. I think we do just philosophically have concerns about the fact that the PPAs do not have the same requirement, and there's a lot of components of these projects, and if something goes up, and it's not easy for the company to tie that to a federal action or some sort of, we get into a gray area of whether or not that was under the company's control. Having a little bit of saving on another component allows them to smooth the costs out. So I think it's worth considering like maybe a 70-30 or a 60-40 cost share just to give a little bit more flexibility so that we're not in here trying to disentangle what's happening with supply chains and tariffs and federal government and what is and is not in the company's control, and not disadvantaging company bids relative to PPAs, because the company bids usually are the more cost competitive ones. So I think there's a concern that long term they will start to increase their costs to manage some of the risk that we're seeing in the space.
Yeah.
But again, if the company is completely comfortable with the 90-10, we're not going to fight. But I think philosophically, if we do this here, we're going to want to do it other places, and giving them a bit more flexibility may actually lower costs across the board.
No, and I appreciate that. That's one of the things that I just want to think on. So that's all I had for now.
Commissioner Partridge and then Commissioner Hunt.
Thank you, Chair Sieben. Feedback is killing me. Sorry. I apologize to everybody. My ears. I know, Paula. It's not your fault. Okay. Sorry. I just have sensitive ears, I think. Okay. Again, as has been said, this is an excellent project. It is supported across the board by all the parties. That's great. And I'm very excited to see this and all of the benefits. Again, I think, it'd be great if it was located in Minnesota, but I think it's still a great project and is going to provide a lot of benefits for Minnesota, and our irritation with North Dakota should not make us make a decision that hurts us because we're annoyed with them. So I'm very supportive of the project. I think I wanted to dig into the cost caps a little bit and just raise kind of maybe a point that's a little astray of what we've been talking about, which is that in 4 or 4.1, we have commission review and approval of specific costs presented in a future petition, which allows us to say, what did you spend really? Is it prudent? Is it reasonable? And decide if we approve that. That is our authority and essentially gives us the ability to say, yes, you were subject to tariffs, or no, you made a bad choice here and it drove up costs. It also allows us to return any savings 100% to the ratepayers. And so I guess I'm struggling with this very complicated set of decision options around cost caps and sharing savings when in 4.1 we would have the opportunity to provide 100% of any savings to ratepayers. So I guess I would like to know, and I want to, I guess, again, the department brought up a really good issue, which I hadn't thought of either, that, you know, putting in these really complicated cost-sharing parameters could, in fact, lead to utilities sort of ballooning up bids. I mean, this one had a long way to go, 50%. Like, they came in and gave us this bid that's significantly lower. They had a lot of room to push those costs up if they thought they would be subject to a cost cap, and especially if they thought that they got to keep the savings. So I realize that it's not an opportunity we have with private developers and PPAs. We can't tell them to bring their costs to us and go through them with a fine-tooth comb and say these are reasonable, these aren't. But we do have that opportunity when we get a utility bid to really analyze the specific costs and to also consider some of the factors that Mr. Pranis brought in to the conversation to ensure that we are allowing the company to make really good decisions and then justify those to us. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that I feel like we have a great deal of protection in 4.1, and I'm a little wary of creating a really complicated system of caps when I think we have the tools we need here to ensure a prudent, responsible, set of costs are recovered from ratepayers. I guess I'd like to hear from the company, Dr. Lieb and Mr. Pranis, if we can. If that's okay, Chair Sieben.
Thank you, Chair Sieben. Commissioner Partridge. Yeah, I think your interpretation, I mean, that seems very consistent to me with the soft cap approach that we have seen in our other projects. And that's probably not a great word. Soft cap implies that it's really more of a firm cap with some relief, where in those instances, if we have a capital budget, and if we come in under that budget, of course, our ratepayers are only charged what we actually incur. And of course, that's part of the statute that we have to come and show that our costs are reasonable. And then it becomes an issue, of course, if we go over that capital budget, then we have to demonstrate a pretty high standard that not within our control, really too, not within our control, and we couldn't have done anything to mitigate it, things that we couldn't contract against or insure against or things of that nature. So I wouldn't disagree with your analysis, and I think that would lend itself to more kind of what we have seen in some of our other projects. Again, the soft type cap approach. And the commission, of course, that's under the statute, we will be bringing in for cost recovery, and we'll have to demonstrate what we spent the money on. And if we come in under budget, under the soft cap approach, that all inures to the benefit of our ratepayers. Usually then the trade-off is then at least we have the ability, if something does happen that is far outside our control, to say, hey, this has occurred. This is still a great project. This is prudent, yet these expenses are prudent, but we have to make that case.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Partridge. I think that if we were approving, so the question is if we were approving just 4.1. So I think if we decide to do that, we still may end up asking some of these other questions, but we would be doing it with more of the actual information. The department's fine with that or with some of these other guardrails. I think if the company's comfortable with just 4.1 and the commission's comfortable with just 4.1, that's fine. We'll just discuss the actual nuts and bolts of what things cost and how we want to allocate the savings or deal with the overages at that time is also fine.
Thank you, Chair Sieben, Commissioner Partridge. I agree completely with your analysis about what the interests are. The utility, the way that the system is structured, and I think well designed, is that the utility's incentive is to be able to grow rate base by winning the bid to get their projects. So that's the big incentive. Yeah, you can monkey with continuing to try to incentivize them a little harder to get a little more savings, but it feels like there could be many downsides, including inflating of project prices, but also efforts to cut costs that end up doing more harm than good because there's too much upside for the utility, which is a thing we see with third-party developers where they capture all the savings, and that's, you see corners cut. I think we have a good system here, especially in a case where there's a clearly much more cost-effective project compared to the alternatives, where you would probably do more harm than good by trying to squeeze that extra little bit of incentive out, both on the immediate project and in the long term. And I agree that the structure of soft cap, ratepayers get all the benefit of the sort of downside. The real win for the utility is getting the project at all, right? But then having, not overcharging because we're not having to bake in a lot of risk of unanticipated events that they have to cover in their initial bid.
Thank you. I should ask Mr. Schultz. I forgot. I'm so sorry.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Partridge, thank you. Yeah, I think you're of course correct that the commission's ultimately got rate-making authority over these projects when the company comes in for a rider or for a rate case. I think the point of the caps is to provide an incentive up front and sort of plant a flag and put the utility on notice that we expect to see you work hard to make these estimates, and then the shared savings part gives them an extra actual incentive that if they come in below the cap, they will benefit in addition to ratepayers benefiting. So we'd still support some variation of our shared savings and some kind of cap, whether it's hard or it seems likely it would have exceptions for things the company can't control.
Thank you so much. I think that's all I have right now.
Thank you, Chair Sieben. So I'll go into the rabbit hole. So capacity expansion model. So Otter filed the ILP in North Dakota and Minnesota, right?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Ham, that's correct.
So was there any difference in the modeling in the Minnesota and North Dakota ILP? If there is any difference, what was the difference?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Ham, there was no difference when we filed our 2021 IRP in Minnesota. We filed essentially the exact same IRP in North Dakota.
And then why did North Dakota reject this project as a system project?
Commissioner Ham, through the North Dakota IRP process, they did hire a consultant that went through our model, and they went and built their own model and made some adjustments and came to the conclusion that there was no need for new renewables through 2030.
Okay, I'm not asking you whether they need the renewable or not. I'm asking you why they reject this as a system resource. That means why did North Dakota reject this project and go with a different project?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Ham, the rationale for rejecting it was that it wasn't cost effective for their customers, and they did not propose an alternative project. They did say that they expect us to remain in Coyote through 2041.
So in other words, if it was cost effective, North Dakota wouldn't have rejected this one. So I want to clarify that whether North Dakota reject this one because it's a renewable versus whether that was not cost effective under their understanding.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Ham, what was ultimately driving their decision, I wasn't inside their heads, but they had some modeling to suggest that these projects weren't part of a least cost plan. But as you're aware, there are many different ways to look at modeling. There's a lot of different assumptions that go in. They did make adjustments to the model, and in reasonable adjustments. There was no big red flags, but they came to their conclusion.
Under that assumption, what was their genetic alternatives?
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Ham. So they initially started with our model, which included, we had LM6000 combustion turbines, we had H-class CTs, we had wind resources, solar resources, and battery resources. They did add in partial CT options in their model as well, just to have a little more granularity, so they weren't so lumpy for capacity additions.
Okay, in that case, how can we protect Minnesota ratepayers for paying for that project? That is not discussed in this docket. That's why I'm just asking you this overall big picture. Because they reject certain capacity, that means they have to build another capacity. How can we protect the Minnesota ratepayers paying for the other capacity?
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Ham, the process would look similar to what we're doing here. If we, through the resource planning process, identified a need for our North Dakota system that wasn't present in our Minnesota system, we would go through the ADP process or through the North Dakota IRP process, request approval for the North Dakota jurisdiction, or if South Dakota had a need. Again, moving forward, given the divergence of our jurisdictions, we will look at our capacity needs individually. And if there is opportunities where, Minnesota has a need, North and South Dakota have a need, we'll propose system-wide resources. But given the divergence of our resource build-outs now, we will potentially need to meet a North Dakota need with a North Dakota-only resource.
But you mentioned that North Dakota didn't approve the new alternative project. They just reject this project in the ILP. So that means we do not have any specific project we can track to make sure that we are not paying for it. So in your next ILP cycle, North Dakota, Minnesota, system-wide project identify CT project, how do we know that it is because of the North Dakota, or is it because of system? I have a concern with, because your system is keep growing and it's very dynamic. And how can we separate North Dakota and Minnesota given that situation?
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Ham, going forward in future IRP cycles, we will be modeling our jurisdictions independently as well to verify if there's a need that, we already do today model our Minnesota system on its own. So we know what the capacity requirements are, we know what our energy needs are, we know what our, other needs for various other compliance rules, and then we can identify which jurisdiction is driving resource needs.
So I don't know whether you can speak, but what is your PRA result for this incoming summer? You don't have to say one way or another in the specific number if you cannot, but were you deficient or were you long or short in the incoming PRA?
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Ham, we were long in the PRA in 3 seasons. There's one season where after everything shook out, we're slightly short, but it was primarily long.
Okay, which season you were short?
Wintertime.
Okay, under that circumstance, we have seen your load is growing in South Dakota and North Dakota. Was it the factor you guys are short in the wintertime?
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Ham, the reason we were short was not because of a specific customer, it's just general load growth, and also accreditation change was a big factor too. We had a couple resources that had a unfortunately timed forced outage previous years that had a noticeable accreditation ding. But it wasn't because of one jurisdiction's load growth.
I understand. That means that there was a D rate. Was it properly reflected in North Dakota ILP?
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Ham, was the D rate. We use averages for historic, and the 21 IRP modeling inputs were created before these D rates happened. So those specific D rates didn't happen, but we don't expect these D rates to be long-term. On these one-off events that have a 3-year impact, we expect those to roll off, and our assumption is average years going forward.
I understand, but it seems that North Dakota ILP outcome was not considering this risk because your fossil fuel units are getting old and you are going to have a higher chance of being out in the long term. And then they are posing significant risk for the capacity deficiency and reliability risk. And I'm very surprised that in that situation, they reject this new capacity as they needed capacity for the system, and they just reject this capacity by saying that, oh yeah, we don't need it.
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Hammond, they did address for these specific solar projects with a wintertime capacity need. The solar projects really don't do a lot to help meet the wintertime PRMR.
Yeah, but overall situation, they are not approving any new project, you said, and then just reject the new capacity, and they're just trying to free ride on the other two systems then.
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Ham, again, their modeling assumptions were different when through the consultant's process. They also are, part of the thing was to stay in coyote through 2041, where that's not the case for our Minnesota jurisdiction. So there's that difference there. And I believe we've got a good system in place to make sure that our other jurisdictions don't free ride. When we look at these individual or two jurisdiction resources, we can set up new asset owners within MISO to track all the capacity and energy revenue from those resources and flow them right back to the jurisdictions that are paying for those resources. And we will be able to split up our PRMRs. We will know which portion of the PRMR comes from North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, and then we'll be able to, account for the additional capacity credit that Minnesota will have, specifically in the summertime too, when prices are likely higher compared to our other jurisdictions.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I was going to go that direction of the overall question. So another question is about this surplus interconnection portion of it. I think companies saying that we should make North Dakota customer whole, so that the foregone potential revenue should be implied in the cost allocation process. Under what circumstance that the CT unit will lose their revenue?
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Ham, if we find ourselves in a situation where sun's shining, solar's producing, and the market would have called for the gas. So if the LMP is, say, $100, the variable cost at the gas plant is $60, but the solar is producing, the thermal generator would be missing out on $40 of profit. And so the solar generator will still be getting the $60 of profit because it's a zero variable cost. And then there will be a make whole payment to the thermal generator based on that lost profit, the variable cost, and the LMP.
Okay, so I understand if it is a day-ahead market clearance, yes, they can do that. But how about the real time? If CT cannot react to real time because you are not procuring gas ahead of time for the real time, right? Because you have to nominate your gas day ahead. So in real time, if you do not have a gas in line, you cannot have an opportunity to make money there.
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Ham, we try to predict what the unit's going to run and procure gas day ahead. But in situations where the unit does get called on in real time, we are able to purchase intraday gas, assuming it's there. And maybe you're referring to situations where there isn't gas. Then there would be no make whole because the gas plant doesn't have the opportunity to run.
Well, not only that, it is that the new solar plants is protecting the risk of your CT unit being not in compliance with the MISO call because you do not have a gas. So you have a risk of procuring gas based on your prediction day ahead, right? Not knowing the actual outcome in the real-time operation. If that unit is not clear in day ahead, now you have to prepare for the real-time action for that unit. Now you have to make a decision whether you are going to procure gas, and there's a risk. You may not use the gas because it's not in the money in the real time. Then you are losing significant amount of money by procuring the gas. If you don't procure gas, then if you are called on by MISO, you are in trouble because that's the time that MISO need that unit the most, then you will have a significant rate on that unit.
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Ham, you're correct with what you're talking about. Solway is different in that we do have on-site fuel, so there already is a hedge to protect that risk, whether it be fuel availability or just outrageous prices that come in the real time. We already have the opportunity to convert over to a backup fuel source. So the solar plant, it would maybe be a secondary. There is some benefit there, but Solway is already pretty well protected from that risk.
That is then good news. Then, as I try to explain in overall, the situation is not simple and black and white. They are in the money, not in the money. Whether they are being clear in day-ahead market and real-time market, how can we assure that your computation accounting is properly reflecting the value of that, and how can we track those numbers?
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Ham, we're certainly going to be open and transparent about this process. We've spent a lot of time thinking about it. We think we have a good system that will do this accurately. We'd be happy to, share this with the department or some other oversight to ensure that they concur with us.
Do you understand that it has to be hourly accounting? It's not a daily accounting or monthly accounting because your unit's value change hour by hour because MISO is settling by hour.
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Ham, yes. Yep, the system that we are anticipating using is an hour-by-hour accounting process.
And then also, because other units interaction with these units, now you have to provide every unit's hour-by-hour accounting to department to make sure that you are properly accounting this value to it.
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Ham, if there's data that needs to be provided, we can provide that.
Okay. So I have some suggestion because I want to make sure that department is being blamed later because they didn't send you IR. So I want to make sure that you are pre-filing everything ahead of time to make sure that department is not having the burden of proving for you because company has a burden of proof. But I heard once that company said department didn't send IR so we couldn't help. No, you have to file the right information in the initial filing so department can do the job without sending IR. That's a very ideal case. When there's some gap, unintended gap, then department can fill the gap. So I have some suggestion for that language. I don't have any paper.
Commissioner Hom, is this in place of what Commissioner Sullivan had, but is essentially getting at the same thing, or be additional?
It'll be additional, and it's more granular in detail of making sure we are properly tracking accounting of the.
Would you add it to
9, yeah. So.
Wait, is the top part that JD's showing new language too, that's in red underline?
No,
no, that's on Sullivan. Okay. Sorry, JD, you can go back down. We just haven't seen it either, so I'm trying to see what we're looking at.
And then also I'll ask the department whether you're okay or not, if chair permits.
Commissioner Hum, what is the asset owner registration sample?
That's what company says. Company is allowed to separate asset within the accounting. So company has a single account with the MISO. And during our AME discussion, company said that company can split certain asset with a different accounting. So we can have a different accounting from MISO. So I think department need to see this one ahead of time to make sure that department can track it without spending a lot of time. Without that, department will have a significant disadvantage evaluating this data because probably department never seen this kind of information before.
Who were you asking
Company,
first
yeah,
for
first
Otter
company,
Tail?
yeah.
Does this language work?
Chair Seaman, Commissioner Ham, I don't see any initial red flags. My first take.
Dr. Lieb?
The one issue
sorry.
that I'm not sure on the timing of getting these asset owners registered, when. It might not be within the 90 days, but we could say that's in the process.
I wasn't asking actual, I was asking sample. If you can have a screenshot of the MISO registration form, that will help. And then actual time, you register, and then you can do the follow with the department. But department need to see what is going on with your suggestion ahead of time.
Chair Stephen, Commissioner, I personally haven't seen the form, but assuming there is a form, we can supply that form.
I mean, MISO has to have a form, otherwise they cannot allow you to do it, right?
Yeah, we can provide that.
Dr. Lieb?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hum, we're good with this language. We think it'll provide the information we need, and we appreciate you saving us 10 days of IR.
Probably it'll be more than 90 days.
Okay. Other questions, Commissioner Hum? Or
I'm done with it, yep.
Commissioner Sullivan?
I wanted to, that was very interesting, Commissioner Hom, so I appreciate that conversation, and I appreciate the company's answers. It was thoughtful, and I wanted to go back to the department. The point that you make about the cost cap and the 90-10 split, I've been thinking about that, and Commissioner Partridge, the points that you raised too, I've been thinking about that, and this overall trend, or this trend in time that you could see develop where the company would start inflating its bids. Now, isn't that, though, going to be checked by the need of the utility to still beat the market? I mean, it still has to beat what IPPs are bidding into the process as well. So, like, I agree that that would be, like, that could be a concern, but there's also a check on that, and that check is they still want to win the bid.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Sullivan, I think that's true. I think the department's concern is that the IPPs have much less check on their costs in their PPA. So we assume that when they give a number, there's some risk tolerance in that number that we're not able to see and analyze, and that if the utility is similarly being, their cost savings are not able to be spread across the project in any way to mitigate some of those same types of risks, they would also start bringing their numbers up, maybe not the full amount to where the IPPs are bringing them, but so maybe like in this project, I think there's a 50% difference between the company owned and the next PPA.
So
maybe
they'll
come up 20% or something like that. And again, I think this is more of like a theoretical, philosophical concern rather than something that we have really good certainty on. But I think it's reasonable to assume the company would put some risk buffer into those numbers, especially, again, just given the uncertainty we're seeing in the market.
Mr. Schultz, do you have
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sullivan, I mean, the utility does have a contingency built into its estimates for both these projects, so there is a contingency factor in there. And I do agree with you that if it's a competitive and open process, as this one appears to have been, then the utility needs to keep its costs down in order to beat the other competitors. So, and the other factor with PPAs, of course, is they don't have ratepayers, whereas the utility has ratepayers. So if we don't protect ratepayers, then they're going to end up shouldering all these costs.
one thing I'm thinking about too is like it doesn't feel like the benefit to an IPP that beats the bid, they get all of it. They get 100%. So it's almost kind of like 90% goes to the ratepayer and 10% goes to the utility. That doesn't actually seem like an advantage that accrues to the utility over the IPP. Do you know what I'm getting at? But maybe you guys are all agreeing with me, and maybe I don't understand what I'm saying. Commissioner Partridge, you kind of got me thinking about this more. No, you all did, and I do want to just say I appreciate that I really do appreciate this conversation.
Yeah. Chair Sieben, if I can, I love the idea of having an incentive for the utilities and developers to come in under bid. So I'm not poo-pooing that idea. I'm just a little concerned with the unintended consequences of putting a really complicated structure around the cost cap. And I really favor the traditional regulatory authority of the commission to be able to say, show me all your costs. Let me decide if these are prudent and reasonable. You can make the case as a utility, and we will review it as regulators and decide if it is or isn't reasonable and prudent, and we can disallow costs that are not. And we're not guaranteeing any costs or any, return, cost recovery to the company up front, and we are returning 100% of any savings to ratepayers. I think that is particularly important right now when we have such an incredible amount of uncertainty in the market around federal action, but also we are seeing all kinds of increased risk for other types of events in our world to disrupt markets, whether natural disasters, pandemics, et cetera. And I am, so I want to provide some flexibility around a project that is 50% below the next bid to, be able to move forward and for us to be able to review those costs and take into consideration whatever has happened in the period of time that they were building it. And I also, to Mr. Pranis's point, I want the company to continue to make really good decisions as they build this project, not just decisions to try to clamp down on costs that could compromise other benefits of the project, including using local labor, especially Minnesota labor, as we've heard from all of the unions that we will be using a lot of local labor from Minnesota in that region. But also things that could compromise the effectiveness, reliability, and safety of the project. So I really favor just our authority to review all those costs very closely and for the company to have to make the case to us later. And we can deny those if we feel that they're not prudent. And if by some miracle they come in under bid, then 100% of those dollars will go to the ratepayers, which I think is ideal over a 90-10 even split.
Yeah, I need to think on it some more. My feeling is that I hear what you're saying, but, and not to be flip about it, but I feel like I'd rather have 10% of something than 100% of nothing, And I think I think that's what we could get if we kind of go the more traditional route. But, I mean, I want to create some kind of incentive there for the utility. You know, that's the whole idea, like with performance-based rate making, not that we're hugely going down that road anymore, but, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I'm, you know. So.
Commissioner Tuma. Okay, Commissioner Hom. Sorry.
No, yeah, I want to go a different direction too, so.
Let's go a different direction then. To the company, OAG recommended something on decision option 1 as eligible for recovery, right of recovery to there. And one of the struggles I had with the petition is I didn't know exactly what you were asking for. It felt a little bit like a predetermination, and I understand why you want it. You want to reduce your risk. But it seems to me a lot of this stuff that Commissioner Partridge was talking about, this is what you've come here for, is to say, are we eligible for right of recovery? And so I think that frames this decision option 1 frame better with that on there. Is there any objection to that language? Or
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, no, I don't think so. I think the way the statute lays out, we come in, we want the commission to approve that these are eligible for recovery and an application toward our CFS and EETS obligations. And typically in the prior projects we've seen, of course, we have a capital budget, and that is deemed, the commission usually in the discussion points to that capital budget, and that's, you would argue, a presumption of what is prudent. And then our obligation later in the statute is to show that, okay, here's the dollars that we have applied toward this for approval. So that we need the assurance, of course, to go forward, whether we finance or not, but we need to have that to move ahead.
Yeah, and that's I think that framed it better. It made me feel comfortable about what we're doing here. We're not trying to expand what we're doing with the statute. And I think what it was is that there's a whole lot of conversation, we're having it today, about what is the appropriate way to allocate those costs across jurisdictions. And even though we're having that conversation today, there really is no decision option resolving that. That's something that we're going to have to address in that future right of recovery.
If I may, Chair Sieben, I think for us to proceed with the project, we'd have to have that certainty on allocation today, Commissioner. We could not go forward with this project with the risk that the commission later on may decide that North Dakota should be a part of this. And it's, as we've described, we have taken great care to structure this where North Dakota will not be receiving any of these benefits. And we do have some visual aids if it may help to show how we're going to do that.
That would be if you have a visual aid to show us, because that's the part that I'm struggling with, because it has been, as we sit here today, this keeps evolving. You can hand it to Paul.
Do you think, Commissioner Tuma, sorry to interrupt, but while we're getting that up on the screen and passing it out, we're going to take a break.
Yeah, that's good.
I need a 5-minute break, at least. So the commission will stand in recess, and then we'll get the handout so the folks online can see it as well. We'll come back at 11:40. Commission stands in recess.
40? No, that's okay.
We have to have this resolved before the projects. We can't come in with this. Correct. So that's.
I thought we were always 50, so now it's 45. That must be the new load. See, that's going to keep changing. These numbers are not.
That's why.
Yeah.
No, that's why you're here.
Kind of funny, my wife who was deaf and had cochlear implants, the things that cause her now pain, my slippers as I shuffle through the house are annoying to her, or when I mix my tea.
Commission will come back from its recess, and sorry for that interruption, Commissioner Tuma, but
Oh, no.
hopefully now we can see the present or the handout. Did we get that on the screen?
And I think what is important, it's 4.1 now refers back to your May 23rd document, and that's what I'm trying to track as we go through this, because we've had these concepts that we've thrown out there about separating our jurisdictions internally, and you seem to have a plan, and this is helpful to have the visual, and I'll let you walk through it. But the point I'm trying to make is, as we go through this process from our IRP, or when this first kind of came up, it continues to seem to have some evolution. And that's where I wanted to drill down a little bit around this incumbent capacity question. All of a sudden, never thought of it. So a lot of these things are popping up. And so my question to you, when you start going through this, do you have a schematic or a design, or I don't use the word tariff because it's not really a tariff, but an actual written up, identified plan of what you're doing? You say, at one point you say you have a good system, I think earlier. Well, the system usually has a blueprint. And so is there a blueprint, or are we inventing this as we go along? And if there is a blueprint, have you shared it with the department, and have we approved it? I remember approving a concept when we did your IRP, but I don't ever remember approving kind of an actual blueprint where we would actually know that now the capacity of, excess capacity should actually be shared somehow. So is there a blueprint out there, or is it kind of an evolving concept that we're working under that is evolving in front of our eyes? Not that it's bad at this stage. I'm just trying to understand what we got.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, thank you for the question. One thing, again, I just wanted to underscore, to make sure I was tracking your previous questions, but for us to proceed with these projects, we do have to have approval of the allocations that we propose. North Dakota has said no to these projects. It's in an IRP order that specifically references Abercrombie. It's not participating, and we have no means to recover from North Dakota. With respect to how we address that, as the schematic shows, I'll let Mr. Jensen walk through this. We did reference this in our filings in this docket. We spoke to how we would designate asset owners. This just illustrates it visually, and I think it can help understand.
Mr. Jensen.
Chair Stephen Kushatuma, we'll start off looking at the load side. What we're proposing is not at all a splitting of our system. It is a change in the accounting for generation revenue. So when you look at the load side here, nothing's going to change. We still have our OTPW asset owner, where we will be purchasing all of our capacity.
That's not what's up on the screen, right?
Can we switch to the other side? There we go, thank you. So we'll be purchasing all of our capacity and energy through the OTPW asset owner. And I think it's important to remember that in the MISO market, we purchase our capacity through the PRA for every single megawatt of our PRMR. And on the energy side, we purchase every single megawatt hour of load through the MISO market at our OTP load zone. There isn't we're not just purchasing our net load from our generation. We are purchasing every megawatt hour. There's a complete bifurcation of the load and generation side. And that's all getting paid for by the traditional allocation factors. Whatever Minnesota's share of the load is, that's what Minnesota customers will pay. Whatever North Dakota's share is, that's what they'll be paying. But then when you flip to the generation side, and this is the change that we are moving forward with,
Mary, oh, there we go. Thank you.
Now instead of just that OTPW asset owner, we're introducing 3 additional asset owners: OTP Minnesota, OTP Minnesota South Dakota, OTP North Dakota and South Dakota. So every single megawatt of capacity that's sold into the PRA and megawatt hour of energy that's sold into the energy market is going to be tracked by these asset owners. And then those...
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Jensen. That was rude of me. But starting when? Like when all of these resources are in operation, or starting at what point?
Chair Sieben, as soon as a new resource that falls into one of these buckets, it comes into service. That's when that'll start. So with, you think about all of our existing resources that are shared, which is everything but Hoot Lake Solar, will still be in that OTPW bucket. All the costs, all the benefits will still be allocated under the traditional allocation method. Now, with the differing orders with our Coyote station, that's what started this. How are we going to put Minnesota's share on AME while the Dakota share is not on AME? And that's where, working with MISO, we came to this additional asset owner idea, so that Minnesota's share of Coyote will fall under the OTP Minnesota asset owner, and we will move Hoot Lake Solar into that bucket. And then the OTP Minnesota South Dakota will have the Abercrombie Solar and Solway Solar. So every megawatt hour of energy that's sold in the MISO market, those dollars will flow back through the OTP MNSD asset owner and we will be able to make sure that's allocated to just our Minnesota, South Dakota customers. Same with capacity, revenue, and RECs. And then the balance of Coyote will fall into the OTP North Dakota, South Dakota bucket, but that's still operating on a day-to-day basis. And you can see the rough allocation factors.
So now help me out. It's helpful to see it. Let's just walk through your filing, page 13 of your filing, initial filing. And it's recognized also on page 6 of our briefing papers is a paragraph, and Commissioner Hom started into that discussion about this capacity question because Solway Solar is now going to be using, and it's what probably makes it very cost effective. That's why you got it to be as cheap as a good, so it's a good thing, okay, that they're going to use that excess capacity. Now, if I understand the way you're talking about, there needs to be some accounting that happens back to the generator of the original generator interconnector, which is what we all agreed to when you built it. South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota all agreed, here's this facility, and it's going to have some interconnection costs over the life of if we're going to pay it off. And so that's built into the cost of that rate base that we're all paying for, okay? Now you want to make an adjustment. My understanding, that adjustment is not going to happen in this MISO calculation that you got MISO to break down. You're going to have to now go back into the allocations between your jurisdictions and modify it by some sort of factor for this interconnection thing. Is that my understanding?
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Tuma, so given the surplus nature of Solway, that one will be slightly different. What's going to happen, again, we'll go through and look at that lost profit that the thermal unit, which falls under the OTPW bucket, would have received. And we will, the solar farm, which falls under the Minnesota, South Dakota bucket, will have a make-whole payment back to the OTPW bucket.
So let's assume that this is an independent power producer building Solway. It's not you, okay? What would happen in that situation?
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Tuma, essentially the same thing. They would have to find a way to make the thermal generation whole.
And how would they do that? They would sign an interconnection agreement, underlying agreement with you. You're the owner of the interconnection, okay? And they would have to come to you and say, we need to work out a payment for that interconnection cost, right? And you would have to negotiate something. It would be a contract.
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Tuma, there would need to be some agreement in place to make sure that that is being handled.
And what happened outside of the MISO calculations, it would be some sort of payment between you and the third party solar developer, right? Yeah, I'm just trying to understand it. I really don't know.
Chair Stephen, Commissioner, we do have agreements in place with the incumbent generator, the thermal, and the new generator, the solar, that details the process of ensuring the thermal resources made whole.
In this particular project, or you're talking general projects?
This particular project, and then we have worked that out with MISO.
You worked this, so in other words, it's already baked into the payments that are going to be going to these different buckets, or is it something you do outside of this bucket thing that you've got here?
It's Chair Stephen, Commissioner, it's the details is baked into the interconnection agreement that will be handled outside of, again, it's a make whole payment from the solar generator to the thermal generator, and those will get handled in these asset owner buckets.
So it's not happening behind the scene after the payments are made. They're going to MISO is going to actually have a formula to do that?
Chair Seaman, Commissioner, no, that will be handled by internally, the calculation of that payment.
So MISO just gives you a payment once a month. They're giving you data.
Correct.
Okay, and so you've already worked out a formula for when the term that I think that you use is when the incumbent generator is displaced.
Correct.
And so there is a formula. Do you have that, Ms. Lieb? Do we know this?
Chair Seaman, Commissioner Tuma, I'm going to have Steve come up and answer because I am not that deep in the docket.
Dr. Racco, welcome. Please state your appearance first.
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioner. Steve Rocco from the department. In Otter Tail's petition, they have an example calculation on how this all works out, if that helps.
So you have an example, but you haven't got any details of whatever language or agreement they've worked out with MISO yet.
No, we don't have specific language. We have an example of how it would work, so conceptually we know what's going on.
Okay. And conceptually, are you good with it, Mr. Racco? I mean, it seems like an elegant solution, but I'm worried by some of the terminology, and I'll ask him about it, but it'll help me out if you've looked at it and you say, you know, when I break it all down, this seems to make sense.
I thought it made sense, yes. I thought it was an interesting and clever solution to a thorny problem.
And to the company, one of the things what caused me concern is in that paragraph you say a dollar figure will be calculated and divided based on the jurisdictional allocations, assuring one that North Dakota customers suffer no harm. And of course I saw that and I'm like, wait a minute, they're going to suffer harm. They're going to be paying more for their energy. So I worried when I saw that was going on. Now I have to read that sentence with the prior part of it. It says before the preference of that, it says, for the hours which reduced peak plant revenues occur, the potential profit margins of the peaker plant will be analyzed for the hours at which it is displaced. And I think that's the key, is a very, very limited, and is it just for the capacity value? In other words, that interconnection cost. It's not talking about whatever savings that are occurring because you'd have less than O&M in that facility. Is it just the interconnection cost, a levelized cost of that interconnection that we're talking about here, or what are we talking about?
Chair Seaman, Commissioner Tuma, we're talking about the actual energy market value, you know, compared to the cost to operate that unit. So back to my previous example, if the sun's shining and the solar is producing at $0 and the LMP is $100 and the variable cost of the gas unit is $60, without the solar, the incumbent generator would have been dispatched at 60 and being paid 100, so there would be $40 of profit for
but
that.
In that LNP, that when you do that, it's not just the cost to do the interconnection. Whatever wires and necessary substation that was built by all the ratepayers in the rate base to make that available for this fictitious, independent power producer. You also have the other savings if it doesn't run. If Solway the gas doesn't run, you don't have O&M. You don't have the staff running there to start it up. Okay, so there are other savings. I would think that's built into that cost that you bid into the market. And we're getting benefit from it not running when the solar is, I mean, it's less costly. You don't have to run someone out to turn the solar on. It's nearly almost runs itself. Okay. And so there are other benefits in there that I don't know if I'm fully taking advantage of with this particular using the market as a scheme. So that's the part that I'm struggling with it. And it could be pennies on the dollar too.
Chair Stephen Kushner, if I could try it one more time here. So if you, the solar plant, and in that instance, when, you know, $40 a megawatt hour is going to go and that make whole payment. The solar is still getting that $60 difference. So the solar is getting paid and will be paying part of its revenue back to the incumbent generator. And then that make whole payment will then go back to that OTPW asset owner. It will be distributed amongst the jurisdictions at the normal allocation factor. So some of that
I got that. I mean, I understand the scheme, and it's an elegant scheme. I just want to make sure the factor that we're doing, that make whole factor, okay, is truly savings for everybody. And so in some ways, not having that plant running, I don't know if that factor is quite fully fairly treating Minnesota for having a cheaper asset who's not requiring as much O&M running behind it. And it seems like Ms. Rocco's happy it is, then I can be good with it, but that's the part I'm struggling with.
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Tuma, it comes into that $60 that the solar is picking up. That's the essential, the offer price of that thermal unit that the thermal unit is then saving. So all of that O&M that is saved is back to the generator that saved the O&M.
So he saved the O&M. Okay.
Is that you tracking?
I'm starting to get my brain around it, but that was a struggle when you said it was just the interconnection cost. That's not the only thing we're saving here for the Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota ratepayers. We're saving also other things, and so I wanted to make sure that was reflected. Is that your understanding, Mr. Rocco?
I keep getting confused by references to interconnection costs. There are no interconnection costs for the solar project because it's using the surplus interconnection. They'll have to build something.
Right, but that surplus, there was a cost. There's a rate base someplace that we paid to build a substation and a power line to get that power out to the rest of the world. Okay?
Yes.
And there was an expectation that the gas plant was going to cover that cost through the rate base process and whatever revenues they get out of it.
Correct.
And so we know there was a cost. There was a dollar amount. Okay.
Yes.
Now we get to free ride on it with the solar is
correct.
The theory. And so, but that free ride, okay, also saves ratepayers money because we don't have O&M and other things at that gas plant because it's not running as much.
It saves the solar plant owners money because they don't have to build a substation. They're piggybacking off the existing one.
Yeah, but it also saves the gas customers money because that gas plant money, because there's not as much cost now to keep that facility maintained. It's a better deal than on some aspects of it than what we had before when we originally bought it. And I just want to make sure that those are recognized, and I think they are.
The fixed O&M would not change for the gas plant. The variable O&M would be baked into the cost discussion that Otter Tail was had with you on.
And it might play out then in the next rate case because then you have less O&M from that plant.
It would take place within that calculation on distributing revenues back and forth.
There's some lag, but it's a lag that it's not going to be that significant. Okay, I think I understand it.
And just to follow up on that line of questioning, we'll see the cost recovery components for these projects come through the rider in large part. But then some of this other, the energy and capacity costs and the jurisdictional allocation, those would likely play out more in your next rate case and in the compliance filings that we've already discussed today, Mr. Jensen, because I do think we're moving in the interest of continuing to move forward. We want to ensure that the department and the commission is getting the right information to be able to continue to make sure we're accounting for this appropriately.
Chair Stephen, all the initial costs of the plant will be in the rider, and then all of this revenue that we're talking about from MISO, from selling the capacity and energy, will then flow through the fuel clause. So the Minnesota South Dakota customers will see a reduction in their fuel clause, which will more than offset the increase from the rider.
And the the coyote or the AME plan, I don't know what to call it, that we approved in the IRP originally, that doesn't start until next year anyway, correct? So do you have any like overall, like just looking at how this is all slotted in, any more like general ideas of, or general sense you can give the commission of the benefits that Minnesota ratepayers will see as a result of our wise action in approving the AME and the IRP, and how these new solar projects again will help drive down rates for customers overall in Minnesota?
Chair Sieben, so you're correct. The AME order is to take place June 1st of next year. So this current planning year, we're still, well, the one that just started, still normal operation, but the capacity value of what would be the AME portion, that, based on this last auction, is worth between $5 and $6 million. That will be flowing back through this OTP Minnesota bucket, back to Minnesota ratepayers. There will be a reduction in fuel costs as a result of that. So another decrement to the fuel clause for Minnesota customers. On the solar side, then you'll see an increase from the rider, and then you'll see an even greater reduction on the fuel costs from the zero variable cost energy.
And sorry, I don't know, Commissioner Tuma, were you done, or were you?
I'm done for now. Yeah.
I didn't mean to, Commissioner, or
Still
pull us
marinating
off
like
track.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Commissioner
I'm still marinating like you too.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. See, but I have a similar question on this jurisdictional issue, and then also go back to a little bit about what Commissioner Tuma was discussing. I don't envy your accountant, and I don't envy Nancy Campbell on this issue, because to me, this is a really, really difficult accounting, and I don't know how you guys are going to pull this out, because complication comes in like a MISO charges. I mean, not just a generation capacity and energy charges, but you have also fixed charges, uplift charges, make-whole payments, all different charges associated with behavior of these individual plants. That's why I was strongly suggesting you to communicate with the department to give them heads up so they don't have to go through this very difficult process within 90 days or 30 days or 60 days. I think they need a lot more time. That means you need to give them this information well ahead. That's why I was proposing that. Being said, I have a question on this paper. So that's associated with my question I was thinking. So this hypothetical jurisdictional locator for the whole system, is it based on Minnesota most recent rate case, or most recent North Dakota your settlement, or is it based on your South Dakota rate case filing?
Mr. Jensen.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Ham, this is not the precise numbers. This is more for, to get the gist of the idea. This is based on our load forecast moving forward. But we will calculate these allocation factors the exact same way they are calculated today.
But as Chair Sieben mentioned, that this jurisdictional locator is decided during the rate case, and you just settled the North Dakota rate case, right? Well, you had, yep. So you have a different jurisdictional allocator compared to the most recent Minnesota rate case, right?
Commissioner Hom or Chair Sieben, we can get that information. I don't know what the allocation came out in the North Dakota rate case.
I don't need the exact number. I'm just saying that it's changing because North Dakota, South Dakota laws are growing.
Chair Stephen Cushman, it is changing, but they will be calculated exact. Nothing's going to change with our OTPW allocation methodology. That'll all be just as it is today.
So you proposed Minnesota most recent rate case allocator to North Dakota and South Dakota, even though they are growing?
Chair Stephen Commissioner Ham, the allocators, if North Dakota and South Dakota grew, those allocators would gradually shift, and costs associated with, so they would be paying for more of the capacity payment, more of the energy payment. They'd be paying for more of the variable costs of our existing resources. So the costs would flow with it with the higher allocation factors.
Yeah, if you're updating the number. My point is Minnesota number is not being updated since when? 2015 or 20? When was your last rate case?
Uh, 2017.
No, it was.
2021.
Okay, good.
Hey,
Okay.
That's what I meant.
It was that long ago.
I wasn't following it, so that's why if you propose higher allocator in North Dakota and higher allocator for the South Dakota for their own jurisdiction, and potentially you can double dip it because our number is relatively shrinking, and still you are using higher number for Minnesota, and you are using higher number for North Dakota and South Dakota. Potentially you can recover more than 100% in theory.
Chair Stephen Commissioner Ham, this is getting a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. I don't know if Mr. Olson can come on up and.
Mr. Olson, welcome. Please state your name for the record.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Commissioners. Matt Olson for Otter Power Company. Chair Stephen, Commissioner Hum. So you're getting at the fact that allocators are always changing. This is happening between the times of rate cases. Otter has a history of trying to extend the amount of time between rate cases as long as possible, and that's been to the benefit of our customers, certainly. But so you're right. In 2021, we set at our last Minnesota rate case allocator. We have since adjusted in our subsequent rate cases in the North Dakota that recently settled and South Dakota just filed yesterday. And those allocations would adjust for load in each of those states. So in theory, there's an over allocation to Minnesota, but costs also change over those times. So what really matters in this equation is whether there is deficiency presented. So you have maybe greater load, but costs are also going up. And so even with a lower allocator, there still may very well be a deficiency in our jurisdictions.
And we don't know until we have a rate case, right?
Correct.
And then definitely North Dakota, South Dakota will bear higher cost, and then you are potentially double dipping if you're using that allocator in allocating your proposed allocation of this. That's why, how do we know that this is a fair and just and reasonable rate for Minnesota ratepayers? I cannot speak for North Dakota, South Dakota, they will deal with it, but how can we know that this kind of a split will be just and reasonable for the Minnesota ratepayers?
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Hom, yes, our proposal here is, as Mr. Jensen described, we're not proposing to change how we have historically set allocators. We could have a conversation about how to make those adjustments more frequently, such as annually when we go through this process. We certainly are not intending to over-collect in this approach here, but historically we have set those allocators when we have done a general rate case.
Then how can we get an assurance from the company that you are not over-collecting, you are not double-dipping?
And Commissioner Hom, I'll go back to my prior comment, which is that over-collection has to do with the current deficiency or not. So whether the allocator is exactly at 100% is probably less of a determination as to than whether or not we have a deficiency created by the rates that are currently in place in each of the three states.
I mean, for a while, company was not growing rapidly, and you are either stable or growing very slowly. So it wasn't a huge issue. But we are seeing large growth in North Dakota, South Dakota, and your first quarter 2025, that the financial Q1 earnings report, and your CEO mentioned that you guys are potentially doubling your load next few years, right?
Commissioner Hom, I will not take issue to what you've said about those statements. I think this is a very large conversation in our industry, that loads are enormous compared to what we have seen historically, and those impacts on, or at least potential impacts on our the way we have done historical allocations is significant. And so we have suggested things like having a mechanism to like a sales rider, for instance, that would true that up. We've actually had a discussion about here with you all in Minnesota, and we've done the same in North Dakota in our recent rate case. That was not approved in our most recent rate case, nor have we established that in Minnesota. So that may be something that we need to think about in the future for how to adjust allocators to more frequently adapt for changing loads.
Okay, I mean, theoretically, this is very ideal, as Dr. Rocco said. I think it can be done if right. It can be, you can accommodate Minnesota energy policy and North Dakota energy policy and being fair to everyone. But in practice, it's not easy. That's why I am trying to make sure that you can say one thing in this proceeding, but in practice, because of for convenience, you can just spread things around and then do not do exact accounting as you promised. We need that assurance that company is going to carry out what you promised here in your practice, and department has to have ability to validate that information.
Yeah, Madam Chair, along that lines, when I think about it, I mean, arguably in this isolated situation with Abercrombie and Solway Solar, because the benefit's going to be higher, carrying a longer lag of a higher allocator would benefit Minnesota ratepayers, is if I'm thinking through it correctly. I mean, assuming that there is that lag, we benefit from that higher allocator because there's a benefit to this, and the benefit would flow then more proportionally. Again, we're talking 1 or 2% to Minnesota because of the tax credits and all that stuff that flows with it. Is that right?
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Tuma, from these particular projects.
Yeah, you isolate them.
Yep.
But the problem that Commissioner Hom is talking about, we don't know how that plays out in the whole scheme of this, of how these revenues flow, and it may be lost in some other plants that are out there that we don't really know about at this stage. So that's the struggle. We just don't have the transparency at this stage how this will look, and we really won't know about it until we get to that next AAA filing or rate case. That's the struggle.
Is there any announced plans, or is there a rate case filing on the horizon for Minnesota that you have said or that we can know about?
Chair Sieben, obviously we have to be careful. We're always evaluating, so I couldn't say that. I couldn't tell you that there is one, but we're always evaluating rate case timing and when to come in, and it has been a while, but I can't disclose, obviously, in this setting, when exactly we would plan to file.
So, and I get that, and I appreciate that, but like to get to the point of what we're trying to do here today, and for commissioners to be comfortable, I think like we have to get back to what the point of this docket is to give you the clear guidance to move forward with these 2 solar projects that are, in my estimation, like very consistent with the direction of the IRP. But in light of that, obviously these are like very important questions to discuss and to consider, and we don't know for sure when you're filing a rate case. We hope you don't, just say that. But, you know, the cost recovery for these projects and some of these issues are going to come through the rider docket, correct? Depending on what framework we make. And then in light of the fact that AME is starting next year, and there are more accounting questions that need to be, like, everybody needs to be more comfortable with, because we're doing things differently, right? give me one more time, Mr. Olson or Mr. Jensen or Mr. Stephenson, the commission can be assured, and the department and the OAG and others, that, you know, if we move forward with Abercrombie and Solway today, this, I don't want to call it a scheme because that sounds negative, but the assurance that Minnesotans will pay only their fair share and they'll get the benefits if we approve, you know, you to move forward with Solway and Abercrombie, the benefits that were clearly articulated in the record and have been referenced. Where do you think we'll see that play out? Is it in the rate case again? Is it through the MISO capacity payments that will come through the fuel clause? Is it through the rider recovery? It probably sounds like it's going to be a combination. But again, just help us, pull us back a little here and assure us, like, because of the new jurisdictional allocators and the way your system is not getting divided but is getting divided, how we're going to, as a commission, like, continue to ensure that ratepayers are protected.
Chair Sieben, I think we'll start off by going back to this generation slide and looking at that OTP Minnesota South Dakota asset owner. That is the way that it's not going to require any additional accounting per se. MISO is going to take care of that accounting, and all of the benefits from these projects will flow through that asset owner, which will then have the allocation factor based on a Minnesota South Dakota system. And so that's all going to flow through the fuel clause, all of those benefits. The costs are going to flow, or are going to be determined also by the same allocation factor. So where we're sitting today, if Minnesota will be paying 83% of the costs associated with this project, they will be getting 83% of the benefits. So it'll be proportional, whichever portion of the costs. And on the flip side, South Dakota will be paying for 17% of the project, and 17% of those costs will be coming through.
And the accounting purposes for the regulatory process, we'll see it again in the fuel clause. Like, that's where we'll see those. Just like now we can look in the fuel clause and see the benefits of how smart we were to earlier approve Hoot Lake Solar, we'll see the benefits and be able to articulate those to ratepayers because of the fuel clause.
Chair Stephen, that's correct.
Okay, that's helpful. I'm not trying to get us, like, I'm just trying to keep our eyes on what we're doing today, commissioners. And I think, like, I'd be curious, Commissioner Hom, because of your questions and how it's helpful to think about how the jurisdictional allocators, you know, are changing because of the load growth. Do you think that we'll just wait to see when it comes through, or that we could do something else on compliance or filings to help ensure that Minnesotans are paying the right share for these resources?
Thank you, Chair Sieben. I agree with the rough justice, but I think also there's a potential the company can double dip because you are using the South Dakota to recovery using South Dakota allocator, and then you are using Minnesota allocator for Minnesota recovery. We need assurance from company that you are not doing it. That's one thing.
But where would we get that assurance? That's what I was trying to ask.
So that is very unclear to me. And then second concern is companies not telling us today which allocator they are going to use to do that rough justice. Whether they're going to use Minnesota allocator, or they're going to use South Dakota allocator, or they're going to use a North Dakota allocator. So we now have a potentially 3 different jurisdictional allocator based on Minnesota rate case, North Dakota rate case, South Dakota rate case.
Whether it'll add up to 100, we don't even know that. Yeah.
I mean, definitely it'll be more than 100 at this point because load is growing in these 2 jurisdictions. We need some certainty from company that which number they're going to use at this point.
Let's let Otter Tail respond, and then you can jump in. Mr. Olson.
Stephen, Commissioner Hom, I think the best method we have today to address your question is that every year we file a jurisdictional annual report, which is the sales from the prior year according to the allocation set in the last rate case, and basically the ongoing surplus or deficiency that we may see. And if we were at a spot where we were, in your words, double dipping, or I'll just say in some way over recovering based on having allocations shifted to other jurisdictions and again having too much revenue left in Minnesota, we would see that in that report, and the commission has the authority to call us into a rate case and make an adjustment to the allocator if that was the case. I will say one of the reasons I think I've heard from the commission in the past that there's some apprehension to make more frequent adjustment to the allocator is that it tends to be that we're operating in a deficiency year over year such that would probably lead to more frequent rate cases and not to refunds to customers. So in this conversation, it's very important to understand the realities of major load shifts, and there may be good reason to change it in the future, but I'll just say that's kind of where it has been, and I think that's a method for the commission to give proper evaluation to where we are on a year-by-year basis.
Thank you, Chair Stephen. Yeah, I understand there's always a risk calling in utility for the rate case because always there is an inflation pressure. But I think if it's a typical utility growth, and I wouldn't ask for the adjustment, but I think as you mentioned, and then I saw from your first quarter earnings call, this is a unprecedented load growth. And then not just overall system, but 2 specific jurisdictions out of 3. So that's why there will be a potentially huge imbalance. That's why we may need some protection for the Minnesota ratepayers, not paying for South Dakota, North Dakota's growth.
Mr. Olson.
Chair Sieben and Commissioner Hom, where we provide that assurance, maybe we need to have more discussion as to what the mechanism is for that. But I do think, as you've said, unprecedented, right? When we get, if these loads come to fruition, which is again a major if, and then there's some amount of lead time between an announcement and development and actual construction, when we see that allocation actually occur, I think that's a great time for us to be having a conversation about what is the appropriate impact on the other jurisdictions where the load growth has not occurred.
Commissioner Sullivan, and then Commissioner Tuma, and then I had questions on the project earlier too.
I'm kind of ruminating on this. It would be, I mean, is the company able to give us any, it feels like we could move along quite quickly if the company would just tell us, yeah, we're thinking about filing a rate case this fall or this winter or something. I mean, you guys are stone-faced. I mean, I don't know if that's...
I don't think they're going to be able to say, Commissioner Sullivan,
They might be able to go back to...
But I tried to ask them, and they said they couldn't answer. So I don't know if we can... What your question is, again, like another shot at, do you want to tell us something we don't want to hear?
Commissioner, I'm Chair C, but I'm not authorized to make news today.
Yeah.
Chair Sieben, we can commit to filing a Minnesota rate case before these projects are complete.
There you go.
Next 2 years.
And then it won't, and then the cost recovery would come through the rate case, or you'll still seek rider recovery for the costs of the projects? I thought it was, your petition is like you're seeking the recovery through a rider.
Chair Sieben, yes, we're seeking recovery through our renewable resource rider. Typically in rate cases is the opportunity to roll rider recovery into rate base. So at some point in the future, that's the norm. So,
and Madam Chair, and to the company, I think and to the motion that Commissioner Sullivan has suggested, you're 4.1, and I want to get the confirmation to this. In there, you have the sentence, subject to the commission's review and approval of specific costs to be presented in a future petition. And so what I read from that is 4.1 is this system, that the good system that you talked about is what we're saying, go forward with, divide up the MISO money as you suggested. But in the end, at some point, it is subject to the commission review and approval. So this is giving you the chance to go ahead and know that you're going to have a cost recovery according to this and this. But we'll look at the more specifics and details, and there might be problems that we need to deal with at that time. You seek a petition, whether it be a rate case or a AAA rated, a rider recovery or whatever recovery mechanism you use. That's that future petition that we're going to have a chance for Ms. Campbell to take a closer look at the numbers, lay them out for us and say, oh, wait a minute, this is a surprise. Is that your understanding of how this is going to play out?
Chair Seaman, Commissioner Toomey, yes, this our 4.1, of course, tracks the language of the statute, and the statute requires us, this is approve its eligibility for cost recovery for us to come back now, and then we do have to prove up. We set budgets for these, and like we have with our AmeriCorps project or our Hoot Lake project, we come back in and demonstrate these are the costs that now we're seeking recovery, and we'll have to demonstrate that they're for the project and that they align with what we told you here. So.
And that's a struggle that we're having. Is a lot of this good system is still new to us, and we're still trying to understand it. It wasn't like we approved the system. The system is kind of getting approved by us as we have gone along through various different dockets, and it's not finalized yet. It's a good concept. We're saying this is a good concept. Yes, us in South Dakota are happy to make North Dakota ratepayers pay more, and we'll actually get the benefits from it. Good. We're all for that, but there's just a lot of uncomfortableness. And I think that's why that sentence to me is a critical part of being able to adopt 4.1 is that sentence. We all know we're going to have to take a better look at this when the actual numbers start rolling in. And that's what I hear you saying. Am I missing anything?
Chair Seaman, Commissioner Toomey, no, I think we're tracking. The main point in our 4.1 is the adoption of the allocation method. So we're assured that where we can't be is waiting to see if there's going to be, if the commission were to say, you need to go collect from North Dakota. We've got the answer there, and we couldn't go forward outside of the allocations that we have presented today.
Here's a part that I still don't understand is the struggle with North Dakota. Once these projects are now going into their rider and not going into it, and they see the money they're paying extra, what happens if they look at you and say, hey, wait a minute, we think these should be allocated across the full system, and that we're not affected by that, but you take a risk of that, do you not? I mean, I suppose they could whipsaw you over there in North Dakota.
Chair Seaman, Commissioner Tuma, I think we have the clear order from the North Dakota Commission denying these projects, and they're
both of them. I saw Abercrombie, but even Solway, you've asked for Solway recovery, and they said no.
Chair Seaman, Commissioner Tuma, we presented Abercrombie. We also disclosed Solway. The key with the North Dakota Commission in our discussion with them about Abercrombie, we wanted to see if they would be interested. We had an investigation report already that said no new renewables from the commission in our IRP docket. Abercrombie, of course, is in North Dakota. North Dakota has an ADP statute where it would be entitled to a rebuttable presumption of prudence. So we basically went to the North Dakota Commission and said, we know you said no, but this is a really good project. And Solway's with it, but only Abercrombie would have the rebuttable presumption of prudence. And we sat down with the commission in closed session and went through the numbers and offered to bring an ADP if they had any interest in developing a record. And the order and guidance that we received is an affirmative no. So from our perspective, have made their choice with these projects.
So next time Christy and I are with the Randy, we can buy him lunch and say thank you, so. You don't answer, don't answer. I'm sending him a message through the airwaves. I'm buying him lunch next time we're together, so.
On earlier coming into this, I just wanted the company to, and that was one of my questions was about that project. But for the company, since one of them is, PPA, explicitly, are you assured in both of the projects that you're going to end up using union labor, or is that too early to say or not? Because it seems to me that that's an important component that I wasn't sure that commitment has been made.
Chair Sieben, like we have with all our prior projects, we'll be bidding these projects out, but it will be at prevailing wage standards. And that's our obligation to our ratepayers. But what we've seen in past history with our projects, these are heavily unionized labor.
And you'll likely have a project labor agreement for both projects too?
Chair Sieben, not necessarily is the information I'm giving. Have we had that?
Mr. Pranis, I saw you. Did you want to jump in there?
Thank you, Chair Sieben. I wanted to make one clarification on prevailing wage. While Minnesota prevailing wage provides a fairly strong protection for the Solway project, North Dakota prevailing wage doesn't provide a lot of protection in North Dakota for a couple of reasons. One is there's a terrible prevailing, so-called prevailing rate for laborers that's under $20 an hour, and I don't think anyone could be recruited to work on a project for that. There's also a lot of questions about federal enforcement because there's not a state prevailing wage attached. So, that is an area where, our intention is to work with Otter Tail to make sure that there are union protections or otherwise, assurances that ensure that people are actually getting fair wages on that side of the project. And that's why we believe that use of a union workforce can help assure that all those benefits are actually realized on the North Dakota side for Minnesotans.
I just think that to Otter Tail, because so many of the benefits that you have ascribed that will help serve the Minnesota jurisdiction, you need to go above and beyond to really try to find a labor agreement with all the unions in the area. And I would hope that given the jurisdictional allocation that we're getting at here and the direction, and I think the support you're going to see from the commission, you need to work really hard to do that. At least I hope you do, even though both projects aren't in Minnesota. Can you at least assure me that you'll work really hard to try to do that, Mr. Stephenson?
Chair Sieben, we will do our very best to work with labor. That I can represent. I would anticipate these projects will be bid out as we have in the past, and
sorry, I couldn't hear.
These projects will be bid out as we have in the past, and our most recent Hoot Lake project was, I think, for the most part, a unionized labor force. So I wouldn't expect big deviations.
Mr. Olson.
Chair Seaman, I was just going to add that, with the help of Mr. Pranitz and our other representatives in the room, we have been in discussions with already both the representatives of the individual unions, but then also getting specific contact information for, various vendors or contractors who might bid using that labor. So those are included in our pool. So that is already an effort we've been undertaking to make sure that we get them included and very up to date as to where the projects are at, what is the next step in the bidding process, and all those kinds of information.
Okay, that's helpful. And then the question, I wondered if commissioners, if we're ready to move into closer along to the lines of deliberations, if you want to work off of Commissioner Sullivan's motion, and then I think you wanted to incorporate Commissioner Ham's language, but are we ready to move more towards deliberations then. If, Commissioner Sullivan, could you help us by, after hearing the discussion about, you know, the caps and your back and forth with the parties, are you more comfortable, are you still like saying, I know you said your feet weren't in concrete, but, and Commissioner Partridge had a little different take, I think, on some of the cost caps, so I'm wondering where you're standing now at that.
I guess what I would like to just hear from my colleagues here is just what you're thinking about on the cost caps. I'm ready to make a motion, but before I do, I'd like to hear what folks are thinking about it. And
I came into the reading the record and think it's somewhat fair for the commission to look at what we've done in the past and be consistent. I also think, though, that times change and there is a lot more uncertainty in the solar market in general. And so being a little bit more flexible along the lines of what the department was proposing is where I personally stand, and think that in the cost recovery proceeding that comes through, we'll be able to look at the more of the particulars and, you know, ensure that ratepayers are only paying what they should. Like you, Commissioner Sullivan, I think my feet aren't in concrete, but my review of the record, I was okay moving forward more in the direction of a soft cap, which again, I think was consistent with what the commission has done in the past. But that's just where I am. I don't know if others wanted to say.
I've been a fan of the soft caps in the past too. The fact that we talked about not just panel costs but project costs that they mentioned, and I'd be even open to softer one than that, but I'm comfortable with it. I was intrigued by the 90-10, but I tend to agree with Commissioner Partridge that that we do have a process for that. Cost caps just at least send out a message. You came out at a bid, we expect you to stay within it. There has been bids in the past. There's a reason why we put these cost caps in place, were because some utilities came in under bid because they thought they're going to be the only game in town, and then all of a sudden all the costs come out later. So the caps kind of do set a expectation out there that I like, but I just generally like the overall 4 company projects to have ability to look at them a little closer. PPAs, that PPA is a PPA. Whatever the price is, and then we have to go with it and decide whether that's appropriate price or not. We don't get to take a deep dive into it. So, but it's the department and the Nancy Campbells and the Mr. Roccos of the world that have to make that deep dive. So I do give them some deference to how they want to do it too, because they're the deep divers. We just get to get the pearls after they come up out of the deep dive. So.
Commissioner Hom.
Thank you, Chair Stephen. Yeah, I think based on the record, I think company's number is consistent with the ILP numbers. So I think I give a lot of value to it, because sometimes company is deviating from their ILP numbers when they are bidding their own project. So given that company's genuine attempt to make consistent with their ILP filing, that is what we approved. And this number is, even though company says it's not exactly the same, but it's very close to the original number. So that's why I do not have a lot of concern that company lowball on this one. So that's why I can go with just simple soft cap.
Okay. No, that's helpful. If Commissioner Partridge, if you want to say anything more, I feel like I know where you're at, but if there's anything more you want to say, feel free, but I'm comfortable now with where I'm at.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have a whole lot to add. I just think that we have the ability to review and make that decision and to return any savings to ratepayers 100%. I did want to add one thing, that I was a little disappointed to hear how quickly the company said that there wasn't necessarily going to be a labor agreement. So I do think that that'll be important. I believe we can consider through the statute, through the renewable energy objectives statute, the impacts on labor. So I hope that you're taking that very seriously when you bring that to us through the rider recovery, that we will be looking at that piece. And I think 4.1 will allow us to really exercise our judgment on all of those objectives fully, and to consider some of those intangible or not intangible, but some of those factors that are not necessarily included in the bid that a cost cap would allow us to consider. So,
Commissioner Sullivan, what's your motion then?
So, yeah, so I guess what I would move, and I'll just look to folks, I'll put something out and then we can kind of iterate to exactly where we need to be. But I will move my compiled decision options with the following changes. So I will, these are my, the ones that were pre-filed. So decision options 1, 2, and 3. And then for decision option 1, I would accept the OAG's language that says as eligible for renewable energy rider recovery. I think that was, Mr. Schultz, that was starting after investments, and then just put as eligible. Correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sullivan, yes, that tracks.
So thank you. And then so decision options 1, 2, and 3, I will move decision option 4.1 with the changes that were recommended. Ms. Kratz, is there, could you, oh, JD, you've got the, oh, sorry. There were changes that Otter Tail recommended to 4.1.
I think it was, Otter Tail did have 4.1.
Commissioner, that was in your,
It's our recommendation.
that was in your what you filed was Otter Tail's 4.1.
Yeah. But I think you made it a further change to it around the language that says instead of just being specific costs, they would be specific project costs, right?
Chair Seaman, Commissioner Sullivan, I think 4.1, our reference to specific, it was panel supply costs versus solar panel costs versus panel supply, and that only applied in decision options 6, and I think your Sullivan modified 6, which if I'm tracking would not be on the table because those are cost cap decision options.
Got it. So I'm just going to keep my Otter Tail 4.1. Then I'm going to do Sullivan modified 5 and remove the symmetrical language. Then Sullivan modified 6, also removing symmetrical. And then Sullivan new 9.
Wait, are you including 6A too? Sullivan modified 6A.
Yes, yes.
But that's the 90%.
I add the 90% on. No, I don't want the 90%. So I'm sorry. So no to 6A. Just do Sullivan modified 6.
And that's where you change panel to projects?
Yeah, I'm trying to just keep this all in my head right now. So
I understand that.
I'm thinking, actually, Chair Seaman, could I just have a moment with staff really quickly, and then I can just pack it all in, and then, because I do want to pick up Commissioner Hom, the language that you put in, and I'm assuming that would be a new 9C then? Okay. So let me just talk with staff, if you just give us 5 minutes, and
Sure.
then I can make it all clear. Sorry.
Okay, that's
about that.
okay. Well, the commission will stand in recess.
I'm very confused.
Up. Oh, you're buckled up. I'm buckling up for the landing. But since I got you mixed up, man, I was like, zip it up.
The commission will come back, from its recess, and Commissioner Sullivan, back to your, motion.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'm just going to start over. So my motion will be to move decision option 1 as amended with that, on the screen here. Decision option 2, decision option 3. I'm going to move Otter Tail's decision option 4.1. And then I'll do decision option Sullivan modified 5 with the removal of symmetrical. Same with Sullivan modified 6, and including project in there, and removing symmetrical. Then Sullivan modified 6A, but I'm not doing the 90% language. Now on to decision option new Sullivan 9, A, B, and then I will move Commissioner Ham's decision option 10 as its own decision option. And if there's something I'm missing or whatever, I trust we will catch it. If there's something, I just put this out here for discussion, so.
I just want to ask the company or the department if, I thought in my mind, like if we did 4.1, then the additional cost cap language was not necessarily needed, but maybe the better question is, do you support, Dr. Lieb, the overall motion or have any objection to it?
Chair Sieben, the department supports the overall motion. I think this is in line with what we would advocate for. On the question about explicitly assigning the soft cost cap versus just approving 4.1, I think the department's position is that it's probably implied by 4.1, but it will, I think, make it easier for the department and the commission to hold the company to the soft cost cap and really carefully examine any costs that exceed that if you have sort of the additional explicit requirement for the soft cost cap.
And Otter Tail?
Chair Sieben, I think in our sense, the soft cap would be encapsulated in our proposed 7.1. Sullivan modified 5 and Sullivan modified 6 speak to, it is a cost cap, but the opener, if you will, for that cost cap is still limited to the result of government action. And at least in our prior dockets, when we talked about a soft cap, we didn't define it, but obviously it has to be things outside of our control. So this is still, I don't know that I would characterize this as the same kind of soft cap that we had in our prior dockets. It's helpful that it's solar project supplies, but what we have here then is certainly our customers will pay, if we come in under budget, that's all theirs. And we're fine with that. But we would, again, like the protection on the backside with, we're not asking to leave the door open, just don't lock the door, which I think part of proposed 7.1 is probably a little closer to the mark, at least to what we have experienced in our prior dockets.
Because you're saying what part of Sullivan modified 5 or 6 is too
Chair Stephen, the trigger, the opener, if you will, is government action. And there are other things that would not be within our control that could affect the project costs, as I alluded to earlier, natural disasters, geopolitical issues, wars, things of that nature that could really impact sourcing. So I think the issue or the question we would have is the limitation to government action.
But isn't there still, sorry, I should have asked this in my questions earlier, but isn't there still enough flexibility in this language where if there's a war or something that is, not, that could presumably be a government action, but is something else that you explained, there's still the ability for Otter Tail to come in and at least request approval to exceed the cap, even if it's not explicitly included as a government action. Like, you can always come back in and ask for additional cost recovery and make your case. I thought that's the way I was reading the record, at least, but you were saying you need to spell out that there might be a tornado, and then that would be.
Commissioner, or Chair Sieben, I think as we would read Sullivan Modified 6, again, the trigger, it authorizes us to request approval to exceed the cap, but we have to show that costs incurred are the result of government action. And again, there are a number of other things that could affect our ability, sourcing, what have you. So I think our request would be to expand that in some fashion, or to adopt what we would consider to be just a traditional cost cap, as we have proposed, soft cap in 7.1.
Or 4.1.
Chair Sieben, 4.1, I think, is separate and apart. That primarily addresses the fact of the allocation, and then it picks up on the statutory language that, of course, we have to come in and present specific costs in a future petition. And of course, you get to review those, but I'm not sure the interplay then with a cap, a specific cap, language that says we're limited unless it's the result of government action.
Commissioner Partridge.
Thanks. Chair Sieben, I guess I'm reading it similarly to the company that if we adopted this, then the only instance that they could ask for cost recovery above the cap would be if they could tie it to government action. Clearly there's a way to tie a lot of things to government action or inaction, I suppose, but I guess I personally feel like 5 and 6 in my mind are a bit unnecessary with 4.1. I understand, the desire for a soft cap. I think, maybe 7.1 would be better, or we could modify the language in these to say that a result of something outside of the company's control. Just for one, I personally don't need language to allow me to assert that your bid price is your bid price when you come back, but we can put it in the order if that's helpful. And I just think that the instances, that we have seen over just the past 5 years, we've had a global pandemic, we've seen wildfires and floods and hurricanes and all of these various things, and bird flu disrupt markets. Like, I think we could be broader than government action, because I think that all of those things are outside of the company's control and could affect prices. And I don't want to create a scenario where they've hit a cap, it's not because of government action, and they're squeezing prices, elsewhere, or squeezing costs elsewhere in a way that makes the project, that reduces the benefits of the project, I guess.
Commissioner Partridge, you're saying instead of Sullivan Modified 5 and 6 and 6A here, you would prefer 7.1?
That, or we could change government action, the words government action, if that's preferable to others. I think either of those.
Factors outside the company's control.
Right. I think, yeah, Commissioner Tuma, I think you're onto it.
I guess that's not really, I understand where this comes from, but that's not really, we talked a lot about, and part of the reason I dropped the thinking on, my thinking on the 90-10 was because it's not really an option that's available to IPPs. It's not really. And I mean, this is only available to the company because they can come to us. An IPP, they're out of luck if this happens to them. This is even having government action in there is more favorable to the company than what we offer, than what is offered to the private market. So that's kind of where I'm like, this is still a pretty good deal. I mean, this is,
Chair Sieben, if I may, I think to the point that the department made, I think the IPPs clearly do factor in additional risk into their bid, and we saw that their bids were 50% higher than the companies. So this is part of the reason perhaps that we got the price we got. And so, yeah, I guess I'm comfortable in just expanding it to say factors outside of the company's control.
That's always, I'm going towards the traditional soft cap, which I think that is, so. But I wouldn't stop you if everybody else wants to go with the, we're just worried about tariffs and.
Okay, so let's say it this way. Commissioner Sullivan's motion is a harder cap than what Commissioner Partridge just outlined. Is that a fair estimation if we get to what Commissioner Partridge was saying? Or if we somehow modified Commissioner Sullivan's motion? I'm comfortable going softer than you are, Commissioner Sullivan. Commissioner Tuma is comfortable going softer than you are. And Commissioner Partridge is. So let's see what I think it would be. What I was thinking is softer is striking Sullivan modified 5, Sullivan modified 6, and 6A, and instead having 4.1 and the company's 7.1. Is that
With language that says out of the company's control. That's not in 7.1 right now.
right? Is that something that, and then we'd have to still do the rest of your motion, Commissioner Sullivan, but is that anything that you could be comfortable with if we are trying to soften up your language without violating your desire here too much?
I think we've opened the door, so that's fine. They're going to come back with a higher price project, and we'll have said okay.
They could come back and request a higher price with the softer cap, I think and then the commission will review it. Commissioner.
Yeah, Chair Sieben, if I can, we didn't say okay. We said you can come back to us with it. If we go that route, is my take on it.
Understood, but the door's open. So.
And Commissioner Hom.
Thank you, Chair Sieben. I think in different docket, I made my statement clear that, yes, bidding process shouldn't be the finding the best liar. I think the bidding process has to be accountable. But given that, I think, as I mentioned, the company did its best, at least in the surface, they're using the consistent number with ILP and these numbers. So in that perspective, I was agreeing with the soft cap. I think the other three commissioners are saying. But also I agree with you in some sense because we need to make company accountable. If difference between PPA and company proposal is not taking the risk and not putting the risk in the price and the risk becomes ratepayers' burden later, I think we have to seriously think about this situation. So the price differential may not be the price differential if there's an actual risk and that insurance premium is right there. So yeah, I agree, and then I agree with your concern, but given what company is trying to do and based on the record, I see that company is doing its best. So that's why in this case, I agree with what soft cap.
Is that a soft cap then in your estimation too, with the modified language up here? Is that enough protection?
Yeah, outside company control is good with me.
There's a whole universe of things that are outside the company's control. So, I mean, I guess what I would say is I want to vote for the entire motion. So I mean, what we can do is, maybe we could move kind of the major pieces and then,
Just take out the 4.1 to 7.1 stuff?
yeah, I mean, if you guys want to remove, I mean, if you, I mean, you're the chair, so I should let you kind of do this. I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but I mean, if you want to, if we want to move.
First time.
If we want to move decision options 1, 2, 3, 4.1, 9, and HOMS 10, we can do that. And then you guys can then move decision option 7.1, and then I'll vote against that.
Okay, so the first motion, again, is your working off of your decision options. 1, 2, 3, 4 Otter Tail 4.1, and these are all as modified. And then, what was after that? 8 or 9?
Then New Sullivan 9, A and B, and then Commissioner Holmes 10.
Is that motion clear for commissioners? All in favor of it, please say aye. Aye. The motion prevails 5-0. Now on the Tuma motion,
That was a Partridge motion.
or the Partridge motion,
She's the one that read it up first. She gets to own it.
is, did we move 4.1 before?
Yes.
Okay, so then this is decision option 7.1. And anything else, Mr. Stolpis?
As modified with.
As modified.
You get the modifications, Judy.
So on 7.1 as modified, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
The motion prevails. And then, are there any other motions that we want to talk about? No? Okay, anything else from the parties? No. Well then, thank you very much, everyone. We appreciate your work on this, and we're adjourned for the day.
Someday we'll adopt a hard cap.
Not today.
Not today. Today is not that day.